Chapter 341, Battlefield Repairs, Target Blueprint. Beasts crawled out of the ground and bared their fangs, rampaging toward the defense line. Dong! Dong! The sound of firing from the guns of the senile soldiers sounded like cannons, with more than 1 meter of flames leaping out from their muzzles. It was like an invisible enormous hand had sent the burrowing beasts flying, falling onto the ground and getting focus fired, screaming in agony. Their carapace and flesh became mud, splattered across the ground, leaving slimy marks on the dry dirt. Hold your positions. Neville's tone was harsh and cold, ordering the B-12 defense team under his command from the communicator in his NCO-class armor. He had 30 soldiers under his command, and their crossfire had stopped the beasts in this area from stepping in. During the gaps between firing, Neville looked around. This wave of burrowing beasts did not cause much trouble. Some armor had been damaged, but no one had died or been injured. Boom! 2 black burrowing beasts suddenly dashed out of the ground near B-12 defense team. Their large mouths suddenly bit toward Neville and another soldier. Before the other members of the defense team could turn their gun around, Neville had already reacted. He threw down his firearm, reached out his metal hands in a blink of an eye, and accurately grabbed onto the opened maw of the beast, not letting its fangs penetrate through his helmet. In an instant, a stream of gas shot out from the mechanical arm. All the joints became locked, stopping the strong biting power of the beast. The next second, a spinning saw bounced out from his wrist, cutting away half of the beast's huge mouth. Neville withstood the beast's claw attacks out of agony, positioned himself, and tackled the beast, throwing it to the ground. He then stepped onto its throat with his huge metal feet, like a needle, pressing the struggling beast. From his wrists, he quickly drew out 2 electromagnetic handguns and shot through the beast's skull. Blood poured all over his armor, and a part of the tactical screen was blocked by slime. This string of actions was quick and smooth, showing no signs of the bulkiness from wearing heavy armor. The other soldier who was attacked was not as strong. His helmet was twisted and deformed, almost flattened, and blood splashed onto the ground from the gaps of the helmet as he fell to the ground. This was the first death. He had fired many shots into the beast's belly before dying, fulfilling his duty till the last moment of his life. He had even worried about Neville, wanting to help the captain before he fell. His muzzle had already turned toward his captain, but he did not have the strength to pull the trigger anymore. The enlistee-class senile armor increased the combat capabilities of a normal soldier, enough for the soldiers to match up to strong beasts. Neville's NCO-class armor had even higher capabilities. Even if the wearer was not a super, with the performance of the armor and his experience as a veteran, he would not lose to most super mercenaries. Neville picked up the machine gun, fired, and killed this beast with his comrades. He briefly looked at the corpse of his subordinate, and without any change to his voice, he yelled, "Leave him, don't break the formation." After more than 10 years in the army, he had already lost count of how many times he had donned this armor. In his long military service career, he had taken part in the Dark Star disaster, experienced the planetary migration, and brought the scouting team to carry out the early stage exploration of planet Senil. With every catastrophe that he went through, there were dead comrades, the number of veterans became fewer and fewer, and his old friends disappeared one after another. Neville's team had been refilled multiple times. His current subordinates were all new recruits that were only in the army for a few years. He always led the team to carry out dangerous missions, so the damage suffered was always heavy, including many friends that he had known for many years. Regret. This word was not in his vocabulary. Neville did not care about the death of his subordinates. In order to protect the entire race, sacrifices were unavoidable. This had always been his creed. In the eyes of others, there was no doubt that Neville was a very cold-blooded commander. After defeating this wave of beasts, the scouting team sent back a message saying that there would be a gap between the attacks. Neville immediately requested repairs. An equipment truck drove beside the camp. A group of maintenance men with all sorts of devices and metal plates started to repair the defense team's armor. Neville was surrounded by a group of maintenance men with electric welding devices, and at this time, he saw Han Xiao walking over. Because of Lurton, Neville had an impression of Han Xiao. He said in a low voice, "Mercenary, return to your position." "I want to request for the change of mission," Han Xiao said. "There's no mission safer than what you're doing now." Neville's tone was very harsh. He had seen many mercenaries requesting to change mission on the spot because they were terrified by the catastrophe and did not want to stay in the dangerous front lines. The Sunils would not force the mercenaries to take part in dangerous battles, they would only deduct a certain amount of credibility points and reward. Of course, Neville would usually get rid of them as soon as possible. He felt that even saying a single word to them was a waste of energy, so he would rather use that time to close his eyes, rest, and recover some energy. However, the safest job that these mercenaries could request for was what Han Xiao was doing right now. Neville did not know what this Black Star's issue was. Was he just too afraid of death and wanted an even safer job? No, he was Lurden's friend, he did not look like such a person. Neville suppressed his impatience and asked, "What request do you have?" "My team wants to join the scouting team." As soon as he said that, the resting soldiers and mercenaries looked over in surprise. Neville thought that he had misheard. This was the most dangerous mission, one that mercenaries would practically avoid at all costs. This was the first time that someone had requested to take on the scouting mission. Neville was a man of few words, but even so, he could not help but ask, "Why?" "My members have some special abilities, they are most suitable to performing dangerous missions," Han Xiao bluffed. "Also, Lurden is my friend. Even so, I still need to be paid, that's my principle. I will request it to above." Neville's tone was not as cold anymore, and the surrounding soldiers showed their respect. No matter what reason they had, these mercenaries were willing to put themselves in danger for the Sunil race despite being strangers, and this action was more than enough for the people of Sunil to appreciate them. The mercenaries chatted among themselves, they were curious about Han Xiao's team. "What mercenary group are they?" "Think it's called Black Star." "Never heard before, probably new." "They sure are hard-working, but why?" "It's not worth if they die anyway." Not long after, a new mission popped up on the interface Scouting the Wild. The reward was 8,000 anaz, and since it was a mission given to the entire mercenary group, the other players triggered it as well. The sight of the mission on the interface satisfied Han Xiao. Due to not having enough credibility points in the mercenary hall of Ubaili Hub, they could not take on other missions. However, they could negotiate once they were on planet Sunil. Although this type of private hire would not add on to the credibility points, it did not lack reward and could earn them renown. Scouting the Wild was indeed dangerous, so Han Xiao was not planning to go himself. Instead, he made the players carry it out. They would not die anyway, so they were most suitable to act as scouts, and he could still get the reward while the players did the mission. The players were surprised. Although it was safe to stay in the camp, it was also boring. Now that they were motivated by the reward, they were looking forward to carrying it out. The players did not care about the danger of scouting the wild at all. "One more request, I hope to join the battlefield repairs team personally," Han Xiao said. "I'm a mechanic, quite a skilled one." "Battlefield repairs?" Neville frowned. "I feel that this job is more suitable for me." Repairs were considered as part of the logistics, all covered by the people of their own race. Letting mercenaries do it was a waste of resources, and it was equivalent to throwing their money away. However, Neville did not reject immediately. The Black Star mercenary group had just applied for the most dangerous mission, and their leader's request did not cross the line. Han Xiao picked up an enlistee-class armor and started repairing on the spot. Using all sorts of tools one after another, electric sparks were splashing. Before the others could even react, this armor was around 90% repaired. His machinery affinity was very high, and he had the boost from Ordnance Engineer, so his repair speed was rapid. If your equipment is only repaired during breaks, it will be very dangerous if it is heavily damaged. However, I'm strong enough to protect myself in the battlefield and can carry out battlefield repairs, providing you guys with safety. Neville asked his superior and received a direct response. "Okay, it's granted." Battlefield repairs required one to be on the front lines of the battlefield. Han Xiao was actively giving up his safe position and taking a risk that he did not need to take. The Sunil people were deeply moved. His spirit was a model of honor and noble. There are too few people like this left. Seeing this, Maple Moon was reminded of Han Xiao's aim of entering the galaxy and thought, every main character has their own personality. Righteousness seems to flow through his veins, is this the hero personality? After the mission changed, the players were all pulled to attend the lesson for scouting the wild. They had to head out before the next attack arrived, and they temporarily split up. Han Xiao did not have to operate the cannon anymore, heading directly to the battlefield repairs team to report. Naturally, this was all part of his plan. The mechanic class could reverse engineer the machinery blueprint from repairing and modifying, only that it required a lot of experience points. Han Xiao was not short of experience. As long as he had enough chances to make repairs, he could figure out the blueprint. He was most interested in the enlistee class and NCO class armors, and the performance of this type of mass-produced single-unit armor was quite high, very suitable to sell to the players in large quantities. Not only could he earn a fortune from it, he could also increase the average strength of his mercenary group. Over the next 2 days, the defense team went through contact battles continuously. Their equipment was frequently damaged, so Han Xiao ran around the defense circle and carried out his battlefield repairing job. His reverse engineering progress was gradually increasing as he came into contact with more and more armor. Although his motive was not pure, his in-time battlefield repairs did indeed save the lives of many guarding soldiers. It was very clear and effective. Even Neville, who did not care much about the injuries and deaths of his subordinates, found Han Xiao to be a huge help. Chapter 342, Hidden Thoughts. In the late night, in the forest 200 miles away from Forest City, a wild scouting team was on the run. They had looks of panic and kept looking back, like something terrifying was chasing behind them. The sound of leaves rubbing each other came from the forest behind. It seems like the sound kept getting closer, and the pitch-black darkness was constantly encroaching upon them. This team was made of 3 people, all Sunil supers. The captain, Fumei, said while shivering, "Don't stop no matter what. The night moth is right behind." According to the different beasts appearing at different times, the catastrophe was divided into stages. The appearance of night moths was a sign of the catastrophe entering the mid-stage. These were beasts that were active during the night, and when they appeared in a pack, it meant the start of the dangerous night battle. The psychic wave made all the beasts on the planet rampage, and Forest City was just one part of it. There were countless beasts killing each other in different areas, nowhere was safe. One of the reasons causing the wave of beasts was that weaker beasts instinctively felt the pressure from beasts at the top of the food chain, so they actively left the territory of the strong beasts in groups and were directed toward Forest City. As the beasts were killed on a large scale, it attracted stronger beasts. The aim of scouting the wild was to discover the species of the attacking beasts and warn Forest City. This was a very dangerous task, as meeting the beast herd in the wild meant almost certain death. This wild scouting team had already sent the message back, and now, they were running for their lives. Feeling the cold and darkness that was inches away, the 3 of them were horrified. Fumei clenched his teeth, his heart filled with regret. Turned out this way again, this is not the first time. He had experienced 3 catastrophes, and all 3 times, he had been chosen for the wild scouting team. He had wandered near the gate of death countless times, and the scars on his body still hurt sometimes. As he sprinted, he could not help but think that he was just about done with such a life. Back when the catastrophe first came, supers came back from the galaxy willingly to protect the race, and Fumei did too. However, now, he only felt tired of the resistance. Boiling blood would cool down sooner or later. He kept giving but never received anything in return. After all those years, Fumei's patience had long worn out. He did indeed love his home, but it did not mean that his race could use him however they wanted to and see them as tools. Their reasoning for the continuation of race had long become a tired excuse in Fumei's ears. It was way too unfair. Fumei's patience had reached its limit. He had to give up his reward as a mercenary to the race, and he had to give his life in times of danger. What gave his race the right to ask so much of him? Just because it was his own race, could he not ask for anything in return? What gave them the right to make someone strong like him take so much responsibility? Fumei's mercenary career in the galaxy had broadened his knowledge, and he felt more and more against giving his life for his race. Life was precious, he had only one. Many warriors had firm beliefs, but there were also many warriors that had the same thoughts as him. After giving so much to the race, he felt that he had given enough. If I can stay alive this time, I will never return or bother about this catastrophe anymore, thought Fumei as he clenched his teeth. Suddenly, a tail shot out from the forest like a whip, ensnaring a scout. The end of the tail was a sharp bone sting. It punctured into the scout's abdomen. The scout snarled, and pugilist flames appeared all over his body. He tore the tail apart, and black liquid splashed on his face. The counterattack caused this person to lag behind for a moment, and that moment decided his life. Swoosh! Dozens of tails shot out from the darkness and tangled up this pugilist, dragging him into the forest in an instant. Fumei turned around immediately and saw an even stronger pugilist flame light up in the forest, displaying his grade C pugilist's strength. However, this flame only lasted for half a second before it exploded and shattered, just like the person's body. Fumei felt a sense of warmth on his face. After touching it, he confirmed that it was the warm blood of his comrade. In less than 1 second, a grade C pugilist had been torn to shreds. The night moth's frightening growl echoed in the forest, not just from behind, but from ahead as well, surrounding the two remaining scouts. Thousands of wobbling whip-like shadows appeared in the dark forest, all night moth's tails. Tuck tuck tuck. The long-lasting explosions from the cannons lit up the night sky. This beast wave lasted for 5 hours. The battle had reached a heated stage, and the third defense circle was filled with the carcass of the burrowing beasts. The Iron Defense team had been battling for way too long and had to change shift. Everyone's armor was more or less damaged. It was night, and Han Xiao carried a large box of repair tools and moved around the back of the tired defense circle, repairing the defense team's armor one after another. Time was scarce, and the mission was crucial. They had to go back to battle right after the repairs were finished. There were also other battlefield repairs teams, but Han Xiao's skill was the best. His name had already spread to everyone in the defense teams, and every team hoped to meet Han Xiao during their repairs. Only then would their safety have the best guarantee. Welding steel plates, fixing circuits, resetting systems, Han Xiao's repairs flowed like water. The battlefield repairs team gave him the internal communicator to make giving him missions easier. Just as he was finished with the repairs of one team, a new command came from the headset. B-12 defense team is requesting in-battle emergency repairs. B-12 was Neville's team, so Han Xiao rushed to the location. Neville's team did not change shift to rest. They were still battling, and repairing during battle had the highest risk. One soldier saw Han Xiao and said hastily, "Quickly, this way." Han Xiao rushed over to find Neville lying on the floor. A beast claw mark had penetrated the armor between his chest and abdomen, giving off electric sparks. The broken pipes were showing, and the energy device had shut down. Neville could not get up from the ground, so a group of soldiers guarded his surroundings. F***CK, all of you new recruits, get away from here. You're not allowed to leave your positions. Neville shouted furiously, but the soldiers did not listen, determined to protect him. Due to them contracting their formation, a gap had shown up at this camp, and a small wave of burrowing beasts had broken through. Such a situation required the standby quick reaction team to back up. The backup was already on the way, so it was not a huge problem. It was a normal process. However, in Neville's eyes, this was an absolute dereliction of duty, so he struggled to stand up in a fit of rage. "Don't move." Han Xiao pressed Neville down, took out materials and tools, and started his work. Neville felt that Han Xiao's hand was like a mountain pressing on his body. He could not move no matter how he struggled. In the end, he could only clench his teeth and give in. "Quickly. Shut up," Han Xiao said expressionlessly. Sunil defensive NCO class armor derivation progress, 27%. He had mostly repaired enlistee class armor during his few days on the team, and he had already spent millions of experience to derive the blueprint. However, there had been very few chances to repair NCO class armors. Thus, he was only at 27%. He also guessed that the NCO class armor required heavy machine modification as a prerequisite, so the progress might be stuck. Other than armor, he had also been fortunate enough to repair some vehicles and batteries, and he had gotten the hovering turret blueprint. Although Neville was in a hurry to get back to the battlefield, he could only wait for the repair, and although he hurried Han Xiao's speed made him feel relieved. It would not take long before he could get back in the battle. Chapter 343, The Split in the Dark. As he was repairing, Han Xiao looked up at the space fleet above Forest City. "Why is your spaceship still not joining the battle?" "It is the city's barrier from the sky, and it also has the strongest weapon. There's no need to employ it against these small beasts," Neville replied. Han Xiao suddenly changed his tone. "I heard rumors about the trump card that you guys have called Commander class armor, which is way more powerful than the NCO class armor. Why don't you guys use that?" "Commander class armor was lost a long time ago, back when we were first attacked on our home planet," Neville said with a sigh. "We lost the technology to make the armor. Now, we only have 4 sets of heavily damaged Commander class armor in our warehouse, and all of them were damaged by 70%. So, we can't reverse engineer the technology. Even though anyone can wear the commander class armor, only the supers can maximize its full potential. When our home planet was being attacked, we sent out all the commander class armor that we had, and they broke one by one, while the soldiers wearing the armor sacrificed their lives. Without them, the survivors would only have been half of our current size. In the end, we only retrieved 4 of the damaged sets of commander class armor. Those 4 sets were the key to our survival, and we keep them under maintenance. Commander class armor was on a different level compared to enlistee class armor and NCO class armor. The latter two were standard equipment, but commander class armor was the highest tier equipment and on the same level as elite equipment and the supers equipment. The materials needed to produce one set of commander class armor could be used to produce a few hundred sets of enlistee class armor. The loss of commander class armor technology meant that the downfall of the civilization was inevitable. If they still had the technology for commander class armor, then they could employ that equipment to fight off dangerous beasts, and the threat of the catastrophe would decrease. Boom! The ground shook violently, and the 2 armored soldiers got knocked to the side. Neville saw something behind Han Xiao and shouted, "Move!" An underground crustacean beast that was the size of a bull knocked the soldiers into the air and charged directly at Han Xiao. There were a lot of underground beasts, and this type tended to charge at their target. Their defensive status was high with their dark armor that was as hard as steel. It could block off machine gun bullets, so it was an extremely difficult creature to deal with. Han Xiao turned around and took out a golden ball from his pocket. The ball expanded into the Wrath of Garrett, and without delay, he activated Flaming Will on top of some critical damage skills while triggering true damage at the same time. A bright light beam shot through the air and directly penetrated the armor of the beast. Only a burn mark was left on the body of the beast. The defense troops needed to use more than 10 seconds to take down the beast, but Han Xiao did it in one attack. With its momentum, the corpse slowly slid next to Han Xiao's feet while leaking a gluey liquid. "Don't be so surprised. I am stronger than you all." Han Xiao withdrew his weapon and continued with his repairs as if nothing had happened. "I forgot." Neville's mouth was wide open. He had thought that Han Xiao was just a logistics worker without any combat power, and he just remembered that Han Xiao was a super. Within a few minutes, Han Xiao put down his tools and said, "It's fixed." The armor worked again. Neville stood up, double-checked that the armor was fixed, and ran straight back to the battlefield, yelling at his troops for leaving their posts. Even though they were being yelled at, the soldiers did not complain. They were actually happy that they had been able to save their boss's life. Neville stopped scolding the soldiers and focused on the battle. He continued to yell and command his troops. Just as Han Xiao was prepared to move to the next repair point, a sharp alarm rang from the base. Han Xiao stopped his steps and looked around. Level 2 warning. The catastrophe is now in the middle stage. A mysterious cold atmosphere spread, and a group of black shadows flew out of the forest. They were covered in black fog and flew across the field a few meters above the ground. They easily avoided the minefield and dodged the majority of the ranged attacks with their agile movements. A bright light soon showed the appearance of these creatures. They had dark gray flesh without any hair. They were at least 3 or 4 meters tall and did not have any facial features. They had 2 antennae on their head to sense the environment. 4 long claws extended from their body, and they had strong beast legs and a pair of dark bat wings. In addition, there were 3 whip-like tails filled with spikes. The night moth. Han Xiao recognized this beast from the initial briefing. The appearance of these beasts meant that the catastrophe had moved past the first stage and reached the middle stage. With the first stage being so threatening, and the later stages being at least a dozen times more dangerous, the deaths and damage would clearly intensify. The retreat order was sent through the earphone. All maintenance staff, fall back to the 5th defense line and enter the base. Han Xiao naturally followed the order and headed back to the metal base. The doors and windows were locked tight, and no exit could be found. It was the required safety measures, so the staff could only watch the battle outside through the window. Pa! Suddenly, the defense lines all turned on powerful full-beam headlights and pointed them to the sky. The dark night became as bright as day. The approaching night moths screeched as the light shone on them, and they lost all sense of direction as they collided with one another, rolling on the ground as if they were drunk. Then, quite a number of night moths landed on the minefield and exploded into pieces. A night moth's antennae were sensitive to light, so they could only move in the dark. The Sunils had prepared specific plans for certain types of beasts. After reaching the middle stage of the catastrophe, the mission was not as simple as just shooting bullets. Now, the troops had to use specific tactics to deal with certain beasts. The tactics had been obtained from all the bloodshed of previous catastrophes, and they would surely reduce the damage. In the end, there were also a lot of enemies that were hard to handle. The toxic bugs were an example. Those things were the sign of the final stage. Every single night moth was on the same level as a Class D super. They were very agile, and their tails could easily penetrate armor. Because of that, a lot of turrets were destroyed, and the defense troops and mercenaries were in a predicament. The number of deaths kept on increasing. The intense battle dragged on until dawn. The remaining night moth finally backed off, and the battle reached a temporary peaceful stage. At least a few thousand soldiers had died in the span of a single night. It was the deadliest battle so far. Countless corpses had been put into corpse bags and sent to the back line. Many family members of the soldiers lived in the city. Their glorified sacrifice was not only because of their pride but also for their families. Their corpses would all be identified by the families, and the night was filled with painful wails echoing from the city. The soldiers that had still been well and alive the night before turned into corpses in a few hours. The morale of the base hit rock bottom. The soldiers were exhausted after last night. They could not even take off their armor in case of an emergency attack, so they scattered and sat on the ground, staring into the sky without thinking of anything. Hearing the cries of the families, the soldiers realized that they could be one of those corpses in the next few days. In such an atmosphere, the mercenaries could only stay quiet and prepare their equipment. This scene reminded Han Xiao of Planet Aquamarine. No matter where one traveled in the universe, the suffering that war brought was the same. Suddenly, there was some movement on the side. A large group of scouts had returned to the base. They were well respected by the Sunils. A lot of soldiers stared at them, and some saluted out of respect. The scouts had a logical schedule. There would always be troops to replace the team for them to come back and rest. The players were the troops that had been sent out to replace this team. Han Xiao recalled a conversation with Lurden. Lurden had mentioned that there were 2 strong soldiers who had reached Class B. They were working as mercenaries in the galaxy, and every year, they would earn large sum of money. They were the idols of the entire civilization. The leader of the returning scouts was one of those 2 Furnas. All the high officials from the military showed up and welcomed the returning troops. Furnas waved his hand and said, "We have lost a lot of brothers. We brought back as many corpses as we could." The crowd spread out and put down 20 or so corpse bags on the ground. They were all Sunil supers. Fumei was also one of them. Han Xiao looked around and did not see Lurden's corpse. He looked into the crowd and saw that Lurden was still standing in the team. Although he had lost another leg and 2 arms, at least he was still alive. "They are all heroes," the military officials said. "We will take care of the rest." "I hope so," Furnas replied. The Sunil supers all looked at the corpses at their friends and showed sorrowful expressions. The atmosphere dropped another notch. Han Xiao kept on observing the expressions of the supers, and he found out that one group, including Lurden, only showed a despairing expression and mourned for the loss. As for the other group, other than sadness, they also showed rage and anger. Chapter 344, Meeting the Liar Again, 1. The returning team split up to rest, while Lurden was jumping on one leg, planning to find the doctor to repair him. Han Xiao whistled, signaling for Lurden to go over. "It's you, can't believe you're still alive." Lurden hopped in front of Han Xiao. "I should be the one saying that." Han Xiao looked at his broken limbs. "Met a bit of danger, almost died," Lurden said like it was nothing. Although he was not very close to Han Xiao, he felt a little bit more relieved when he saw someone whom he considered a friend to still be alive. Han Xiao raised the toolbox in his hand and said, "Seems like you need a very skilled mechanic. Is it free this time?" Lurden raised an eyebrow. Han Xiao thought and said, "Get me a drink, in the same bar as last time." It was currently the break period of the catastrophe, there was time to rest. The commanders had allowed Han Xiao into the city seeing that Black Star mercenary group had actively taken on the job of scouting. Lurden had a backup implanted arm, so Han Xiao repaired and connected it very quickly. Originally, only Lurden's right arm had still been made of flesh, but it was now broken, bound, and left alone. His expression was calm. He did not care about losing the only part of flesh that he had left. The two entered the city and came to Hurlus Bar as Han Xiao had requested. There was quite a number of customers that day, all of them were civilians from nearby. The soldiers were bathing in blood and fighting outside the city, and most civilians hid in their home or in the official emergency evacuation areas. There were also some that chose to use alcohol to get rid of their terror. 90% of the shops in the entire city were closed during the catastrophe, but Hurlus Bar opened as usual, so the place was a little noisy. Walking up to the bar counter, Han Xiao said, "2 glasses of your signature drink." Lurden immediately raised his hand and cut in. "Just 1 glass." Drunk, Hurlus raised his head, and after seeing Han Xiao's face, his expression changed. "You again." He remembered Han Xiao, a weird guy that came to find his brother's old notebook out of nowhere who seemed to also know his secret. "What do you want again?" Han Xiao smiled and said, "Just here for a drink." Hurlus stared at Han Xiao for some time, then unwillingly took out a bottle of alcohol. Han Xiao did not speak to him again, just drinking and chatting with Lurden casually. Hurlus saw this and kept his doubt. He turned away to attend to other customers while eavesdropping on the conversation between Han Xiao and Lurden. Han Xiao looked at Lurden's broken arm and said, "Don't you feel pain?" Lurden shook his head and said, "When I went through the implant operation, I told the doctor to cut off my nerves, so that injuries will not affect my combat ability. You're an esper, so implants will weaken your power." "Why did you do it?" "It's fine to be weaker," Lurden said calmly. "I can live longer this way. A dead man is of no use. To choose implants to live longer, and to actively execute the most dangerous mission, your love for your race really is strong." Han Xiao's eyes sparkled. "No one is born a hero, the supers of Sunil seem to be too selfless. You guys must have your reasons, how about tell them to me? I'm quite curious." Lurden kept silent for a while. His expression became nostalgic, and the look in his eyes started to change a little. It was like he could hardly keep his calm when he thought about the past. He said slowly, "Just like every other Sunil, I once had a complete family. My father was strict, my mother was kind and warm, and I had 2 younger sisters. When Dark Star attacked, I was still a kid. Even now, I can still remember the laser cannons descending from the sky, thick like waterfalls, turning the largest buildings in the city centers into ash in an instant. We joined the evacuating crowd, and the military protected us. They knew clearly that staying behind meant death, but they still prioritized guarding us and sending us away. Unfortunately, my parents could not board Godara's rescue spaceship. They died halfway there. A beam of laser turned my parents into ashes. I was just a kid in despair, and the only thing that I knew was how to cry. I followed the other refugees numbly. Every day, the army gave the refugees very little food. I was starving so much that I could not control myself at all. After I took the food, I hid more than half of the portion, only giving a little bit to my sisters. I just wanted to live at that time. I did not know how to think of anything else. Then, my 2 younger sisters starved to death." Lurden paused, then said in a very low voice, "I can still vividly remember their expression, their bony palms grabbing my clothes as they stared right into my eyes, like they were telling me how hungry they were, but they had no energy to talk. Those 2 pairs of eyes filled with despair cut right into my heart. My brain was blank, and a few seconds felt like centuries. When their arms slipped down without strength, only then did I dare take deep breaths. I was completely petrified. I couldn't believe what I had done. If I had shared the food with my sisters, even if I would be hungrier, at least we all could have lived, but I knew nothing back then. I only thought about having filling meals. I felt that if I ate less, I would be starved to death the next day. I followed the crowd up the rescuing ship numbly, not knowing where to go. There were many kids like me who lost their families back then. They were all given to veterans with a disability to raise. A group of kids and I were given to a veteran, too. From then on, we lived with him. He raised us and taught us how to fight. He was a rough, impatient man, but a good man and a good soldier. Many of us supers were orphans that were raised by the race back then. As time passed, I gradually took that veteran as my foster father, but I always had a grudge in my heart. I felt my past was too dark. I felt I was an evil man. If I told my foster father, would he chase me away? One day, on impulse, I told him about my younger sister's death, and he gave me a serious scolding, but not because of my selfishness. He scolded me that if I had the heart to think about the past, I should be spending that time to train. He said that the race was on the verge of being wiped out, and there was no time to be held back by the past. Even if I was a criminal of countless sins, as long as I held the gun to protect our race, then I had only one identity: a soldier. No one would care about my past, only what I can do. Han Xiao touched his chin and asked, what happened to that old veteran? The first time the catastrophe came, although the disabled soldiers could have been protected, he actively requested to go into the battlefield, where he died. Afterward, I heard that he belonged to the team that protected my group of refugees. I even once received food from him. Lurton shook his head. I owe everything to the race, therefore, I contribute everything I am able to. So, your contributions are to return favors. Han Xiao turned around and looked at Hurlis, who was leaning over, eavesdropping. The man was expressionless, and he turned around and walked away impatiently as if he had absolutely no interest in this kind of conversation. Not entirely. It's also for the continuation of my race. After telling the nostalgic story, the sadness from losing comrades earlier was washed away a little. Lurton wanted to know more about Han Xiao as well, so he changed the subject. Let's not talk about me, let's talk about you. You. This time, Han Xiao suddenly stood up and cut him off. Pardon me, I have a private matter to settle. I need to leave for a while. Lurton was speechless. Shouldn't friends share such stories? Why is he running away after listening just to my experience? I feel I've been taken advantage of. Han Xiao walked to the side, found Hurlis, and said, I want to talk to you privately. Hurlis suddenly became cautious. What do you really want? Han Xiao was direct this time. I know many things about you, such as your strength, what your older brother left for you, and other stuff. Maybe you will be interested to hear about Sunil's future. Future. This word made Hurlis very surprised, and he became even more unsure of Han Xiao's goal. Who are you? I'm a foreseer, or you can call me, a prophet. Han Xiao gave a weird smile. The reason for him to come into contact with Hurlis multiple times was because he knew Hurlis' hidden identity. He was the main character of the Sunils. Chapter 345, Meeting the Liar Again, 2. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. Foreseer. Hurlis' face was filled with doubt. A stranger had suddenly appeared out of nowhere to find him and said that he could foresee the future. He had never experienced something like this. What the hell is this? Hurlis' first reaction was to not believe him. Since you can see the future, do you know what I will eat tomorrow morning? It's okay if you don't believe my identity, you just need to listen. Time will prove if what I say is true. Han Xiao ignored Hurlis' mocking and started his performance. He purposed acted mysterious and said with a voice only two of them could hear, contradictions have already appeared. Not long now, the guardians of your race will split up, and planet Sunil's revitalizing dream will forever be shattered. The catastrophe will finish all of your resources and hope. The only path left will be to look for help and become a subsidiary of an advanced civilization. Your people will spread to live in different cities, gradually losing your independence, relying on the strong, then slowing losing your heritage and spirit. Your past will become your words, recorded into the history books of the other higher civilizations. Your children will only come to know of the history of your race through words. Your race will be another withered race in the broad universe. He used unclear words on purpose. Foretelling had to give people a blurry and unclear feeling, and when it really happened, people would feel enlightened and regret when they thought back to the foretelling. Han Xiao, of course, knew the future of the Sunil race. This race did not end physically, but they did end in another form. Spirit, heritage, belief, history, these were the things that a species had during the process of evolving. Through thinking in various processes and coming up with answers that belonged to this race, these untouchable things were what made a race a civilization. Just like the base of a building, they were something that everyone in a race shared, pillars that held the race together. There were many races and species of beasts, but no one ever called them civilizations. Planet Sunil was a refuge civilization. Supers were their guardians, and the race appreciated their contributions but did not have extra resources to reward them. The race could only recover by relying on supers. It was this everlasting contribution that sparked the contradictions. In his previous life, a group of the supers could not take it anymore. They felt they had done more than enough, so they chose to give up their home and in search of freedom, abandoning the race, which they saw as a burden. taking the galaxy as their new home. The Sunils were heavily wounded. Originally, the damage after every catastrophe was still acceptable, and the strength of the race as a whole was slowly recovering. Everyone had been looking forward to the day when all that bitterness would be gone and they could taste the sweetness. However, when the guardians of the race split up, their situation went downhill extremely fast. The damage suffered through the catastrophe started to grow larger than the race's accumulated resources, and the times became harder and harder. The Sunils did not have enough resources to migrate. Even if they did, they would not do so, they could only look for help. Many evil forces existed in the universe, and refuge civilizations were their favored prey. If they left Godara's protection, worse dangers would come, such as large scavenger groups, slave traders, and many others. Examples of this were not extremely rare. Slave traders with strong backing wiped out an entire race except one, then raised the price due to the reason of that one person being the last of an extinct species. There were also evil organizations wiping out races to fulfill some kind of ritual or simply for satisfaction. Regulations kept the universe balanced, but it could not get rid of all evil. In the end, Sunil accepted Godara's military aid and migrated once again. Godara split the Sunils up and sent an army for long-term protection. As Godara made more decisions and as time passed, the Sunils were assimilated, ending the Sunil civilization. The three universal civilizations made laws that forbade the invasion of lower civilizations, but the war never ended. The festive, boisterous, and the regulated universe was just the surface, and hidden in it were many ambitious civilizations that either waited or were already acting. After all, every civilization dreamt of becoming the overlord. Since it was not allowed to invade lower civilizations through war, they assimilated them. Even the lawful civilizations were not completely kind people, and even Godara, who held pure blood beliefs, also cultivated subsidiary races. Whether a civilization prospered or fell was on the population. If the people wanted their civilization to continue, others would only grab the opportunity to take advantage of them. Every day, there were races or civilizations dying in some corner of the universe. What difference would one more make? At most, their race's history would be recorded and become a conversation topic after dinner, or a record that did not make a difference to anyone. Some galactic shows liked to report the dilemmas faced by civilizations, and its selling point was sparking sympathy in the audience, but hoping that others would turn sympathy into actual action was extravagant. One might make an emotional decision because of one's emotions, but when it came to an entire civilization, an entire race, only profit mattered. After all, Sunil was just one of the hundreds of thousands of normal races. It had no right to receive special treatment. Furthermore, this was Shattered Star Ring, the edge of the visible universe, rural and unpopulated. The active groups of people were scavengers, abandoned people, mercenaries, and vulture-like pragmatists. Furthermore, Darkstar had attacked the lower civilizations because they wanted them to spend Godara's resources. If one refuge civilization could stop relying on Godara and rely on itself because it had revitalized, how could the Darkstar allow the birth of an ally of Godara? Han Xiao used vague words to describe this future to Hurles, letting him know that the Sunil's future was covered in darkness. Why did you tell me something like this? Do you think I will be interested? Hurles asked indifferently. He raised his head and gulped a mouth of alcohol, looking completely unconcerned. Because I saw your ending, many things can be prevented. Han Xiao smiled. Hurles put down the glass and said curiously, how do I end? Although he did not believe that Han Xiao was a so-called prophet, most people would be curious about their future. Han Xiao had talked about many things earlier, and Hurles really wanted to know how this guy would foresee his fate. Han Xiao stopped instead with a smile and said, when you believe I'm a foreseer, I will tell you. I already do. Hurles took back what he had said previously. If you really believe, you're welcome to actively find me next time. Han Xiao smiled, lying did not work on him. Hurles was the storyline main character of Sunil. According to this person's experience, Han Xiao thought that there was a chance to take away this main character role. At this time, Hurles was still an alcoholic escaping from reality, not matching up the style of a storyline main character. The parts he was going to play had yet to start, and the great mechanic Han had done all this specifically to target Hurles' changes in the future, to leave a heavy impression. His faction had to have more than one NPC other than himself, and Hurles was the first testing target. At this time, an argument could be heard from the corner of the bar. One of them was clearly drunk and had a conflict with his friend. It seemed like they were on the topic of the survival of their race, and they had a conflict due to disagreements. You don't know about sh*t, the friend said furiously. This is all part of Godara's plan. They purposely migrated us to a dangerous planet. How could they not know this planet's actual environment? Godara wants us to beg them. Chapter 346, Contradictions and Splitting Up, Last Stage of the Catastrophe. On the other side, the drunk man spun the alcohol bottle. He was very emotional as he shouted loudly, "Then we beg Godara. What can race honor do? Only staying alive is important. These leaders' heads are all full of sh*t. Too many people died every time, my 2 younger brothers died in the army. All of this is useless, so we should get help from Godara. Why are we acting so tough? These supers are useless. If they really were strong, the catastrophe would be long gone." The drunk talked in a very disdainful and emotional tone, despising the supers and the military for being too lousy, blaming and complaining with more and more vulgar language. This kind of action angered the other customers. Supers and the military were heroes to most of the civilians. Any doubts or insults would cause an outrage. Everything you are enjoying now is because the heroes fought their lives for it. Who are you to talk? The drunk sneered and said, "This is what they should do. With ability comes responsibility. If not for the race's cultivation, they would be ordinary people just like me. People like you are so disgusting, you should be sent out the city." The drunk sneered again. "Even if the city's defenses are broken through, I'm a civilian that will be prioritized in the evacuation. I won't be the one dying anyway. You don't deserve to be protected." The crowd became even more furious. The argument became heated. Lurden sat at the bar counter, expressionless, like he did not hear it at all. He did not even bother to turn around and look. At this time, a very young guy pounced at the drunk guy furiously and started a fight straight away. He pressed the drunk man to the floor and punched his face rapidly, with blood splashing onto the floor. The others saw that there were blood and hastily tried to pull the young guy acting on impulse away. "Lana, calm down. Stop punching, he's going to die." Lana gave a few more punches before he finally stood up with hatred and got pulled aside. The drunk man was bleeding from his nose and mouth, unable to stand up after receiving a heavy beating. The other customers went to check, and luckily, the drunk man was just wounded. Then people blamed Lana for using too much force. Many people here were his neighbors, and Lana was a young man who hoped to enter the army. He was strong and muscular, an ideal recruit. "You two, get the hell out of my shop," Hurlis yelled, "go home and calm down." Lana left unhappily, and the drunk man was carried away as well. Thus, that small farce had ended. Han Xiao turned around, looked at Hurlis, and said, "I'm Black Star. If you are interested in what I said, come find me, I can solve this problem." Then, Han Xiao called Lurden, and the two of them left the bar. The unconcerned expression faded from Hurlis' face, turning a little serious. His eyes sparkled, and unlike his disguise, he was not really completely unconcerned about the future of the race. He did not know if a mercenary who called himself Black Star was really a foreseer. Even if he was, it was possible that he had lied about the foresight to trick him into a trap. He definitely had a motive, but Hurlis did not know what it was. Was he coming for him? The bar door was pushed open again, and a tall man in a hood walked near the bar counter. "Give me a glass of beer." The man in the hood raised his head and showed his face. "Furnace." Hurlis was surprised. "You don't drink? Consider it a celebration of me coming back alive." Furnace took Hurlis' glass and drank a mouth. It seemed that they were very close. If others knew the strongest grade B super of the race was this close to the boss of a small bar, they would definitely be shocked. They were childhood playmates, so Hurlis was way too familiar with this person. Almost every positive adjective could be used to describe Furnace: brave, honest, responsible, and many others. After the first disaster for the Senils, Furnace became a mercenary to contribute to the race. Hurlis actually always envied Furnace. From a young age, his short-lived older brother had kept talking about Furnace this, Furnace that. In his eyes, Furnace was the kid next door. Although he did envy him a little, Hurlis also respected Furnace. He knew that he definitely could not be as dedicated as Furnace. After his older brother died, Hurlis lived an aimless life waiting for his death, completely unconcerned about his race. He knew that he was a lazy person when his older brother was alive. He had always been scolded for not being hard-working. Many people felt he was just as talented as Furness but wasted his life away. Now, Furness was the guardian respected by the entire race, and he was just a nobody. He knew Furness. He was a very self-disciplined person who would not break the rules for anything. Thus, Hurles frowned and asked, "What really happened?" "Brother, I can't take it anymore. I'm preparing to leave." Furness gave a faint smile full of bitterness. Hurles had never seen such an expression on this resolute face. "Leave?" Hurles was shocked. "The universe has endless possibilities," Furness said. "Only when the past is cut off can one go forward. I don't want to be held back by the race anymore. There are many warriors who have the same thought as me, so we will not return after this catastrophe. We have protected the race long enough. Many friends sacrificed themselves, and some people begged for our protection, yet they feel it's a given. This is not our obligation, and there is no need to continue. We have done more than enough. Maybe the race accepting help from Godara is the best ending. At least no one will die for nothing anymore. Even you are giving up." Hurles was completely shocked. Suddenly, Han Xiao's words appeared in his head. "Is this the split that guy predicted? Then will our race have the future like he said, become a subsidiary of Godara and lose our heritage?" Hurles arranged the information and words to use, then told Furness about Han Xiao's foresight of the ending after Sunil accepted military help from Godara. Furness shook his head after listening. Without any change in his eyes, he said, "Staying alive is the most important. As long as the people are alive, the ideals will not die." "Is that really the case?" "But the Furness I know absolutely would not abandon our race." "You're alive, but you have changed." Hurles saw Furness' expression and knew that he had decided and was not going to be convinced. Having always seen Furness as the noblest friend he had, his emotions were in turmoil. Now, he could never look at him the same way. It was like he became a stranger. "Then why did you come to tell me this?" Hurles asked. Furness shook the bottle and said softly, "Honestly, I dislike you a lot. You have stronger powers than me, but you hide and accept our protection without hesitation. Never mind, let's not talk about this. I just came to tell you about it. It's up to you to continue to avoid everything or to stand up." Furness pulled up his hood and left Hurles to dwell on that thought. Since the seed was already planted, Han Xiao did not enter the city again. He stayed outside the city and carried out his battlefield repairs. Upon entering the mid-stage of the catastrophe, the battlefield became more heated and tragic. All sorts of horrifying monsters charged forward one after another, and he could not continue to run across the battlefield with just his body. He wore his Amphiptera mechanical suit. Sometimes, when the place he was repairing had gaps, he had to become the backup to fill up the gap as well. Among the mercenaries, his strength was not too conspicuous, and the only reason the other mercenaries remembered him was because the Black Star mercenary group actively took on the forward reconnaissance mission. Many mercenaries felt Han Xiao was insane. When the forward reconnaissance team next changed shifts, his mercenary group would definitely suffer a huge loss. A large number of soldiers died every day, and incomplete corpses were sent to the back line one after another to be identified. The defense camp also had many damaged weapons and carriers, so the defense was becoming harder and harder. Only the 9 battleships in the sky stayed still and never fired. The Sunils had limited resources, and battleship energy was scarce. Only when the extremely strong monsters showed up during the last stage would the battleships join the fray. Furthermore, the Sunil's battleships could only fly around the planet for 3 to 4 days at most. Other than guarding the sky, the most important use of these 9 battleships was to make sure that they could transport the civilians away if the situation got out of hand, abandoning the city in order to escape. It was an emergency retreat route. 8 days later, the city had a strange calm period. The alarm signifying the last stage of the catastrophe sounded, and this time, everyone received breathing masks. Not just the logistics personnel, even some supers entered refugee facilities. An overwhelming hum of insect wings flapping appeared, and thick and black clouds swarmed over. These were all extremely aggressive small insects, concentrated like a wave. Chapter 347, Raising Rewar. Whoosh. In the defense circle, some kind of device shot out purple-red biohazard gas and covered the entire camp. Poisonous gas was the best form of attack for this kind of tiny insects in large numbers. This specially made poisonous gas was very strong. Even flying insects that could endure fire would fall to the ground after tens of seconds, then struggle till their death. This time, Thunderous roars appeared, and enormous beasts with an average height of more than 10 meters charged forward together with the swarm. The beast wave at the last stage was much more terrifying than the previous stages. These beasts were all species at the top of the food chain in planet Sunil: bone armor war elephants that stood tens of meters tall, lava flying serpents that breathed scorching fire from their mouths, and many more. It would take a defense team at least 20 seconds of focus fire to kill one beast. The poisonous gas was everywhere. It was a weapon to kill the swarm, but it was also a double-edged sword. If the armor of a soldier were torn open by the beasts, they would also be affected when they were exposed in the poisonous gas. Even though every soldier's armor was equipped with the antidote, it would only delay the effect of the poison and make it non-lethal. However, it would still paralyze the person affected. The Sunil's technology could not formulate a poisonous gas that was only effective on insects, so they could only use strong biohazard gas. While the gas was a double-edged sword, it was the only way to deal with these flying bugs. A group of them could suck a Sunil completely dry in half a second, so they absolutely could not let them enter the city or it would be a horrifying disaster. They had to stop it outside the city no matter what. At the last stage of the catastrophe, everyone had to fight in the poisonous gas. The situation was truly worse. The two outermost lines of defense were already about half destroyed after the previous two stages, and this was the Sunil's disadvantage as well. The beast wave approached the defense team camp against the cannon and fire. The ground shook violently, and a bone armor war elephant charged toward B-12 defense team in an overwhelming form. Even Neville, who had iron will, could not help but be nervous because of the pressure from its enormous size. At this moment, a large stream of light covered in electric sparks descended from the sky, blasting half of the bone armor war elephant's body away, and its flesh splashed onto the ground. Neville looked up. The stream of light had left a distorted mark across the sky, and its ending was connected to the battleship. The 9 battleships in the sky finally fired after doing nothing for half a mouth. Blue light surged in the electromagnetic rail cannons, shooting out bullets covered in electric sparks, picking only enormous beasts as targets, reducing the pressure on the ground immediately. The battle broke up instantly. Deafening cannon fire and electric spark shone across the battlefield. The beast wave was unending, and the stench and metallic smell of blood were pungent. The defense team fired wildly while firelight illuminated on the corpses of soldiers and carcasses of beasts all over the floor. The losses on both sides were huge. Clank. In the B-12 defense team camp, a more than 10-meter-long pure purple thunder leopard moved quickly like a flash of purple lightning, cutting through one of the defense soldier's armor, slashing the soldier inside in half as well. Neville ignored it and commanded his subordinates to focus fire with a serious face. He only had 12 subordinates left. The loss was more than half. "Do not be shaken, defend the camp," Neville ordered coldly and harshly. Countless bullets shot into the thick hide of the thunder leopard, spaying out blood. The thunder leopard growled as it pounced around, killing every soldier. Soon, Neville was the last one left. The thunder leopard was still very healthy, and the countless fresh vital signs far in the city were extremely luring to this thunder leopard, which was bloodthirsty in nature. Just as the thunder leopard was about to cross the line of defense, Neville immediately stood in front of it, firing his machine gun. After seeing the thunder leopard killing the soldiers so easily, he knew that he was definitely not a match, but he still tried to stop the thunder leopard without any hesitation. The duty of the defense team was carved deep in his bones, not allowing any beast to cross the line of defense he was in charge of. As long as no order came from above, he would never back off. The thunder leopard growled with anger and pounced toward Neville. Controlling the NCO-class armor, Neville engaged with it, rolling around, dodging and leaving wounds on the thunder leopard one after another. He slid from below the thunder leopard's abdomen and dodged its claws. Just as he was about to stand up, he felt an extreme pain on his left arm. The thunder leopard had turned its head around in a very strange way and bitten through his arm armor. The poisonous gas streamed in from the hole. Neville felt piercing pain from his skin, which quickly turned into the numbness of being poisoned. As he held his breath, the antidote was injected into his wrist, and a sense of burning flew through his body. After injecting the antidote, the poison effect will be delayed for about 2 minutes. If I hold my breath, I should be able to last 10 more seconds. I have to kill this beast within this time. Neville's expression was cold. Even though he was poisoned, he still prioritized stopping the enemy. He had put his life aside long ago. The man and the beast fought each other. Neville abandoned the bulky machine gun, favoring the saw on his wrist and the cannon and rockets embedded into the armor to fight. After dozens of seconds of heated combat, both parties were covered in wounds. Neville started to feel his body getting stiff, and his head was becoming heavy. It seemed that the effect of excessive blood loss and poisoning was starting to get to him. Neville suddenly stopped moving. The Thunder Leopard pounced over, and he did not dodge, letting the Thunder Leopard press him against the ground and penetrating his chest and abdomen with its claws. Plop! Blood spurted out from his mouth, but Neville endured the pain. One of his hands stabbed into the Thunder Leopard's neck and tightly hung onto the Thunder Leopard, his other hand reached into the Thunder Leopard's mouth and fired wildly. He knew his movements were too slow, so he had given up his life and used himself as a bait. The Thunder Leopard twisted itself in agony. It bit off the arm inside its mouth, then slashed its claws down on Neville in a frenzy. Neville was heavily injured, incapable of moving despite the huge claw expanding in his sights. "This day has finally come for me," he murmured calmly. Just as the claw was about to slam down, Neville saw an enormous blinding electric fire descending. The next moment, Neville and the Thunder Leopard were both covered by the light of the electromagnetic rail cannon. The tragic battle ended. On the first day of the last stage of the catastrophe, the losses were heavy. Dozens of fighter jets fell, and even the energy shields of 2 battleships were almost shattered by the countless enormous flying beasts. Such a horrifying battle. This is the first time I've seen something so large-scale. I'll never accept this kind of job again. Fear still lingered in the hearts of the mercenaries as they gasped for breath. Many corpses of the other mercenaries lay on the floor. Han Xiao repaired equipment after equipment. He did not need to take part in the battle directly. After all, in such a dangerous situation, even he was not confident about staying safe. Applying for the repairing job was also because he did not want to take the risk. He was there to earn the reward, so it was okay as long as he utilized his abilities and helped. He would not really give his life to other organizations because of money. During the rare calm period, another group of scouts returned, and all the players came back. The expression on everyone's face was relaxed, like they did not carry out a dangerous mission but went sightseeing instead. Being in dangerous areas gave no stress to the players at all, they would revive anyway. Although there was a limit to the number of times, most of these people were pro players. Of course, they knew to monitor their times of death. They were already at max level, so losing some experience was nothing, and the mission reward would cover that loss anyway. Furthermore, it was more useful to earn the universe currency. The people of Black Star gathered, and after sizing them up, the mercenaries around immediately realized something shocking. It looks like they did not lose anyone. What? Every single one came back alive. The mercenaries were completely shocked and curious. They hastily asked from the other members of the scout team and got the answer that these people would revive. Their expressions quickly turned into envy and fear. In the universe, supers that would not die were the most difficult enemies, and no one dared to take them lightly. This mercenary group is entirely made of immortals. Wow! These mercenaries remembered the name of Black Star Mercenary Group, a mercenary group with all members that could not die. In their professional perspective, this mercenary group would become extremely popular in the near future. Black Star Mercenary Group's name was reported to the superiors of the military, and they took it very seriously. Immortals were most suitable for reconnaissance, and it could largely reduce the loss of the scout team. Therefore, the military general found Han Xiao personally, talked to him in a very sincere tone, and placed himself lower than Han Xiao, completely different from when he talked to other mercenaries. What the army expressed was that they hoped the Black Star Mercenary Group would not take shifts and rest. They wanted the group to go scouting ahead once again. Most importantly, they promised to definitely raise the reward. Such useful help definitely deserved better treatment. Thus, the army actively requested to raise the reward because they were afraid that the Black Star Mercenary Group would reject the request. The mission reward increased to 12,000 INAs, a 50% increase. Han Xiao accepted it on the spot, and the bidder players started a new round of reconnaissance. According to the time, it was also the last round of reconnaissance. The corpses from the battlefield were transported back for their family members or friends to claim. Han Xiao realized that Neville was dead and felt a little emotional. After all, this was someone that he knew. The family member who came to claim him was a woman, wailing loudly. Han Xiao asked the other soldiers and came to know that this woman was Neville's wife. Apparently, Neville also had a young kid at home. In Forest City, most people stayed in front of their televisions and watched the live report of the battlefield situation. In such a crisis, the media did not report any fake information at all, they were all the true situation. In an extremely nervous state, they were still able to barely hold on. The bar did not open. Hurla sat in the attic, watching the report from the television, and drinking alcohol non-stop. Images of the tragic battlefield flashed one after another. Suddenly feeling inexplicably upset, he placed his bottle down, left the bar, and strolled through the streets. The streets were quiet, there were no pedestrians. After walking aimlessly for a while, he heard a faint argument. As a grade B super, although he had not fought for so many years, his sharp senses had not deteriorated. Out of sudden interest, Hurlis followed the sound and came to the outside of a building. It was close to the bar, and the sound of argument became clearer as he neared. I will reach the required age for the army in a few days. I'm joining the army. The voice sounded familiar, like he heard it from someone before. Hurlis was a little curious, so he hid and jumped onto the balcony, peeping inside through the window. He realized that he did know the person talking. It was the person who beat up the drunk man in the bar a few days ago, Lana. Lana was arguing with his parents. Their clothes were all rather poor, they were civilians in low positions. Lana's parents were very anxious at this moment. Joining the army is suicide. I won't allow you to go. Chapter 348, Must Be in Love. The Sunil civilization advocated the admiration of supers and the army, and the spirit of contribution was indoctrinated into them from a young age. Lana had dreamed of joining the army ever since he was a child. He wanted to become an honorable soldier to protect his race, and he had been training hard for it. His neighbor was a veteran, so Lana and the nearby kids always asked the veteran to train them, counting down the days till they reached the age requirement of the army. The catastrophe came once every few years, so the time between was all they had for the development period to collect resources, build more weapons, and train a new batch of soldiers. The Sunils would usually start recruitment for the army after the catastrophe. Although their population was less than 10% of their peak population after the Dark Star disaster, the population density was still quite high when they squeezed into a large city. There were two types of recruitment, one was a self-request, which needed no further explanation, and the other was conscription, targeting prisoners and families with many children. All the youngsters coming of age were also required to take part in military service for some time to go through basic training so that when the time of danger arrived, these people could be recruited as soldiers on the spot. Of course, Lana wished for more than joining the military services. He wanted to request to enter the army and become an official soldier, but he was met with strong rejection from his parents. How can you say something like this? Protecting the race is an honorable thing to do, countless people have sacrificed themselves. I'm willing to dedicate my life to it, too. It's an honor. Lana said with his eyes wide open. You're still young and don't understand many things, Lana's parents said. There are so many people joining the army every year, it won't make a difference if you don't go. No, it's a shameful thing. My dream is to protect our race. Lana said passionately. Then have you thought about us? Lana's mother was sobbing. You used to always look for Mr. Neville next door for training. Yesterday, he was killed in action. His corpse was transported back, shattered. You did not witness the scene. His wife fainted while crying many times, and he left a child with only a mother, only able to get past the days with pension money. It's way too heartbreaking. He still has a kid of a few years old to raise, and we are already old. We only have one child, you. If you die, what do we do? How do you want us to live? Lana could not speak properly as he mumbled, this is not right. Lana, be it supers, the army, or Mr. Neville, they are all great people, but we are just normal civilians. I love my race, and I will work to contribute to the race. The battlefield shouldn't be something in our consideration. The father placed his hands on Lana's shoulders and spoke with a heavy heart. He respected supers, and he respected the army too. While he appreciated the contribution that they made, when it came to himself, he could not make the same choice. Lana lowered his head and stopped speaking. Lana, you have to promise us, the mother said anxiously. I promise, Lana said unwillingly while looking down. I will enter military service, not the army. His parents heaved sighs of relief. Outside, Hurlis leaned against the windowsill, staring blankly into the sky. In the sky, the 9 battleships blocked the sunlight that was supposed to shine into the city like heavy clouds, the engines on their undersides creating streams of air that became wind. The pungent smell from outside the city could almost not be smelled as the engine fumes were blown into the city. Many memories showed up in his mind: Ferna's bitter smile, Lana's passion, that drunk customer's blame, the bloody battlefield, the sacrificed soldiers, the admiring people, countless times of pulling himself away from reality after sobering up, every day he spent letting himself rot while being in the bar, and the Dark Star disaster, which he had not thought of for a long time. That was the last time that he had seen his older brother, Delvis. In his memories, Delvis was still wearing a pair of thick glasses, with messy and oily hair that had not been washed for a long time. His white research coat looked like a robe on his short and thin body, appearing weirdly funny. In the video communication, standing before a research lab with a shattered dome, Delvis pushed his glasses out of habit, then said to his hulking younger brother, "Hurlis, kid, I left something for you in the research lab at home. The password is our parents' birthday backward. I didn't waste much energy on the encryption." His tone was just like normal, full of disappointment and expecting better from him, but with a little hint of not wanting to leave. The communication ended there. At the time, Hurlis had looked outside the window, at the direction of the military research lab where Delvis had worked. There had been countless ferocious Dark Star battleships hovering above, along with mushroom clouds exploding from the ground. He had used the password to open Delvis's personal research room. Hurlis had always wanted to sneak in and wreak havoc. However, he never could figure out the password. Inside, he had seen the inheritance that his older brother had left for him. More and more memories appeared. Hurlis still remembered, back then, he was a thug that did nothing useful, enjoying himself with his older brother's salary, reaching grade B at an extremely young age. He had been 1,000 times stronger than Delvis, but he had always stood lower when he faced his older brother, always getting blamed and scolded. Yet, he had not cared because it made no difference. "Brother," Hurlis muttered softly to himself. The memories were like rolling bubbles. His thoughts stopped at Han Xiao's deep and dark eyes. His pupils seemed to have the current of time hidden in them. Hurlis' expression became a little firm. He went back to the bar, entered the attic, then opened a wardrobe that had been closed for a very long time. Inside was the tunnel toward the secret basement under the bar, which was already covered in dust. He walked down slowly, turned on the light, gazed upon the pile of boxes in the basement. Most of them were Delvis's relic. He walked directly to the corner of the basement, pulled out a wooden box, swept away the accumulated dust, and opened the cover. Inside was a dark-colored suit, the inheritance that Delvis had left for him, armor that had been specially built for him in secret shattered light. During the Dark Star disaster, Hurlis had relied on this armor to stay alive, and he had never used it after that. Thus, it had simply collected dust in the basement as a souvenir of his older brother. It was possibly the last usable commander-class armor in the entire Sunil race. Hurlis stared at the armor, and his eyes gradually turned sharp. "It's been too long since I battled, hope I don't get cramp." The beasts appearing in the last stage were horrendously strong. They were all at the top of the food chain on the planet, and some of them already exceeded the beast category and could be called monsters. One such monster was the huge acidic flying beetle with a wingspan of more than 100 meters that would not die even after taking more than a dozen rail cannon shots. It was able to shoot out corrosive acid from its mouth, sticking onto the shield of the battleship and sizzling with smoke. One of this monster could be dealt with easily, but they appeared in groups, and the firepower of the camp could not match up. So, the shield of a battleship was broken, and its exterior armor was damaged. It was forced to descend and undergo emergency repairs. What did the monsters on this planet eat? The mercenaries were in shock. Monsters with a 100-meter wingspan were almost as large as Sunil's smaller battleships. This was just a wild animal on a planet, but it had grown into something comparable to a battleship. Such an enormous monster did not even require the ground scouting team, the reconnaissance aircraft could locate it directly. Missiles exploded deafeningly in the sky non-stop. Suddenly, an alarm sounded from within the defense ring. It was an emergency announcement. "Prepare for impact. Prepare for impact. Mountain beasts have been detected and are closing in. Estimated to arrival is 14 minutes. All soldiers, get ready. High-energy concentrated particle cannon, begin charging." At the 5th defense ring, the ground cracked open, showing a metallic, fearsome, and extremely complex cannon. Its muzzle was a hexagon, and it was embedded into the hollow particle stabilization device, like a cannon being divided into sections. Han Xiao's mechanical suit immediately released a high-energy reaction warning as a light started to appear in the muzzle of this enormous cannon. This high-energy concentrated particle cannon was a scrap product spat out from the central wormhole of the Shattered Star Ring, a galactic-level war weapon, and it was unknown which higher civilization it came from. It had been picked up by scavengers for sales, and the Sunils had spent a huge sum to buy it. This was what they had learned from the huge loss they suffered from the first catastrophe. They had to have a trump card against strong beasts. Although it was a scrap product, it had cost the Sunils a fortune. It had technology protection from a higher civilization, could not be repaired or studied, and could only be used. Every shot required a large amount of energy, which was precious on planet Sunil. Every shot meant burning away a large amount of fortune, as their energy technology naturally did not match up to higher civilizations. It had to take a long time to charge up before firing, so they only used this enormous cannon when they met the most fearsome monsters. The Sunils had explored this planet for more than 10 years, and they had recorded a large number of beasts in their database. Mountain beasts were one of the monsters at the very top. Strong beasts were all diverted away by the frontline combat troops, so the appearance of this mountain beast meant that they had failed. Han Xiao was surprised. He casually penetrated an approaching thunder leopard, turned around to look at the high-energy concentrated particle cannon, and felt like he was almost drooling. This feeling of butterflies in my stomach. Chapter 349, Shocking the Entire Race. 1. The ground tremored. In the distance, the forest collapsed as an enormous beast slowly approached, like a looming, moving mountain. Although the mercenaries knew about the mountain beast from the database illustration, many of them were still shocked. Such a gigantic creature. The mountain beast had 4 feet as thick as buildings and a long tail. Its thick stone-like scales provided a sturdy defense along with the large mud-yellow shell on its back like a tortoise shell. Its head looked like a shovel, a protruding lower jaw and eyes hidden between the gaps of its stone shell creating an aura of fierceness. Actually, the mountain beast was a very gentle animal. Its favorite pastime was to disguise itself as a mountain and sleep. Only because of the effect from the psychic wave did it become abnormally grumpy and aggressive. Adult mountain beasts stood about 150 to 200 meters tall in comparison. Sunils were like ants. The battleships in the sky fired at the mountain beast from far away, and 6 or 7 shots from the electromagnetic rail cannon hit its body, shattering large areas of its stone shell. However, the attacks did not hurt its flesh. The defense of the mountain beast was truly astonishing. These shots enraged it, and it let out a growl, which sounded like a moo. Its tail thrust into the ground, rolling up a huge pile of mud mixed with trees. As its tail tightened, this pile of mud became much denser. Swinging its tail, the pile of mud shot out like a cannon, containing the power of a mountain beast. Its energy was terrifying. Even Han Xiao could not see the flying pile of mud clearly. He could only see a phantom that disappeared in an instant. The shield of the battleship flashed, and the clod exploded on the ground. Electric arcs rippled through the entire shield, and cracks spread rapidly. This hit almost penetrated the shield, and the battleship increased its energy output urgently. Only then did the shield recover to its original state. Seeing that its attack was not effective, the mountain beast rolled up another pile of mud. It could still use this attack hundreds more times, but the energy of the battleship was finite. High-energy concentrated particle cannon charging complete. The target has entered the firing range. Firing in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire. A bright cream-white beam hurtled out of the cannon. Its diameter was at least 4 meters, yet it flashed across thousands of meters in the blink of an eye, penetrating the mountain beast's carapace with ease. When it pierced into its abdomen, a chain of explosions erupted in its body. Boom! The explosion shook the ground. A thick leg was sent flying, and a large hole opened up in the front half of the mountain beast, allowing blood to rush down like a waterfall. With a scream that shot through the sky, it fell onto the ground. The high-energy concentrated particle cannon was a weapon used between the battleships of very high-class civilizations. The astonishing shot immediately injured such a gigantic beast heavily. This was the Sunil race's current trump card. The sight of the beam raised the soldiers' morale through the roof, and they quickly suppressed their exhaustion, fighting against the beast wave even harder. What a horrifying weapon! Han Xiao's eyes were shining as he suppressed his desire. This was a weapon that could only be gained in the later stages. He could not learn it with his current knowledge level. He would only have the chance to build a weapon of such a level if he kept growing. The particle cannon did not retract, and it started charging again. The broadcast sounded once again. This mountain beast was not the only one. Two more strong monsters were approaching. Soon after, they appeared in the soldiers' sight. One was a flying monster that looked very similar to a dragon, a lava lizard, which lived in volcanic environments, had 100-meter wingspan, and was protected by ferocious scales. This was much harder to deal with than acidic flying beetle of the same size. Not only was its carapace strong and hard, it could also spit lava. The other was a terrestrial creature, the king predator. It looked like a tiger and a leopard covered in scales like a suit of armor. Although it was only 30 meters tall, it was even more dangerous than the mountain beast due to its incredible agility. Unlike the mountain beast, which was like a sitting duck, its movement was fast as lightning, therefore difficult to lock onto. It could easily break through the lines of defense one after another, and its sharp claws could tear metal apart with ease. It was truly the biggest threat to the land troops. The name King Predator came from its dominance in the forest. It was the well-deserved ruler of the forest. Every time that it appeared, the Sunils had to pay a very heavy price to deal with it. There was even this one time when a king predator had almost penetrated all the defense rings and broken into the city. The situation took a sharp turn downhill. The lava lizard dived at a high speed while the king predator ran like lightning. There was a strong enemy approaching both on land and in the sky, and there was still an injured mountain beast that kept throwing clods. When the particle cannon finished charging, it aimed at the lava lizard in the sky and fired, directly penetrating one side of lava lizard's wings. The monster spun and fell to the ground, sending out a violent shock wave. The flying enemy had to be dealt with first. Thus, the king predator on the ground could only be temporarily stalled by men while waiting for the particle cannon to recharge. The army gathered thousands of troops ahead of the king predator, yet even that might not be enough. An endless rain of bullets covered the king predator, all of which were deflected by its scales, leaving only sparks. The king predator moved fast, and no attack could slow it down. If it bashed into the iron line of defense, everyone could tell that it would create a bloodbath in the defense teams. At least 2 teams would be lost. No soldier was shaken. They were all unafraid of death. Just as the 2 parties were about to clash. Boom! Dust suddenly shot into the air, and the seemingly unstoppable king predator was halted. It opened its bloody mouth widely and bit onto a ruler-like iron-gray rectangular block of metal, which an armored warrior was holding onto. They were in a battle of strength, and their strength was comparable. It was this armored warrior who stopped the king predator, leaving only a magnificent silhouette to all the soldiers. The people opened their eyes widely, wanting to see who this person was, but he was wearing a helmet, and his face could not be seen. The armor was a little humble, like tights embedded with some armor plates, and dark in color. Hans Xiao raised the edge of his mouth when he saw this. It was indeed Herles. So, he came, the great mechanic. Hans smiled. Let me see if the current you is strong enough. The king predator seemed to have detected danger. It jumped aside and moved around cautiously. Just as the defense team was about to go forward to surround it, Herles suddenly said, "Leave this brute to me. You guys go to other places." "Leave to you? Who are you? What if you fail?" The troops, of course, did not trust others easily, but before they continued to move, strong pugilist flames burst from this armored warrior, and a change occurred that left every Sunil in shock. The humble suit on Herles' body suddenly shape-shifted, and the compressed armor plates expanded, turning into countless complex and precise armor pieces. With the flashing of light, the tights quickly became extremely complex silver-gray armor, like a gorgeous ancient knight's armor. Soft white metal extended from the shoulders like a piece of cloth, moving in the wind like a cape behind his back. Even with the great mechanic Han's very picky sense of beauty, this style was impressive. Energy surrounded the entire armor as Herles shook the rectangular block in his hand. It expanded part by part and turned into a 10-meter-long mechanical battleship slicing blade. All the Sunils were stunned. A word deeply buried in their memories started to surface, and countless soldiers opened their eyes even wider. This is the commander-class armor. The strongest armor of the race that was said to be lost. Every soldier was stunned and shocked. Their mind was blanked. Commander-class armor was a legend to the Sunils at this time, and the legend had become reality that day. Herles twisted his neck, and the familiar thick pugilist energy flew through his entire body. The dormant fighting genes in his body gradually awakened. This tailor-made armor was still in perfect condition. I almost forgot this feeling. It feels Quite good. With a loud yell, Hurlus held the 10-meter battleship slicing blade and pounced, as fast as a phantom. The thick light from the blade flashed like lightning. Swoosh! An impact wave came out of the blade, creating a trench dozens of meters long. The king predator barely dodged it, and a wound appeared on its long body, which expanded rapidly, blood jetting out. The position of hunter and prey switched instantly. Chapter 349.1, Shocking the Entire Race. 2. Hurlus was a grade B pugilist, and Shattered Light was a super equipment, tailor-made for him, enhancing his pugilist abilities further. Many energy-converting devices hid between the gaps of the armor, and the raging flames sent waves rippling through the air as he moved. Grade B pugilists had surpassed the early stage of a pugilist. They were walking, living bombs. Hurlus' strength was not to be ignored even across the entire Shattered Star Ring. The Commander-class armor was a piece of top-class equipment, and its level was completely different from the Enlistee class and the NCO class. With the energy-enhancing battleship slicing blade, Hurlus' damage was astonishing. The thick light from the blade released shock waves, creating trenches on the ground one after another. This level of strength was way higher than the normal soldiers, and there was no need for anyone else to join in. Hurlus spun the rough-looking battleship slicing blade with ease, much more agilely than the king predator. Having nowhere to escape, the king predator's flesh was splashing all over. Hurlus' godlike power had lit fires in countless soldiers' hearts. The commander-class armor appeared again after disappearing for so many years. Who is this armor user? The Sunils had many questions in their minds. Commander-class armor had a very special position in the Sunils' hearts. Many people knew that this was the display of the strongest single warrior in the entire race, and it was almost like a totem. Hurlus' appearance awakened the buried memories of every Sunil. Morale skyrocketed instantly. In gaming terms, all Sunils received the All Attributes Boost buff. Han Xiao was watching the show from the side, nodding. Hurlus was very strong, much stronger than his current self. Hurlus starting to fight means that the Sunil have entered the storyline I'm familiar with. Han Xiao thought. With him existing, Hurlus' actions should deviate from the original storyline, so he just needed the chance to abduct him. The particle cannon fired twice, heavily injuring the mountain beast and the lava lizard. This weapon was common in the galactic battle between high-class civilizations, and it was a scrap product. The Sunil could only burn lower-grade energy with their energy technology level, and even with so many restrictions, its power was still enough to be a trump card for protecting a city. During the charging period, Hurlus successfully killed the king predator and started to run around the battlefield. With his armor and energy protection, he did not fear being surrounded by the beast wave. The battleship slicing blade slashed horizontally, unmatched in the beast wave, containing the disadvantageous situation in the area. Hurlus could not stop the entire beast wave alone, but his actions had an undoubted effect. The soldiers in this area finally had a chance to breathe. On planet Aquamarine, a grade C super could go head-on with an army. Hurlus was one grade higher. Even though the beasts at the last stage of the catastrophe were strong, he could still deal with them easily. Furthermore, he was a tank-type pugilist. A single unit with extraordinary powers was more agile, like a sharp blade. Between the same technology level, high-grade combat powers and war troops differed in quantity and quality. A strong single unit was an army by itself. Hurlus jumped and moved around, becoming the center of attention on the battlefield. Looking at him raised the soldiers' spirits. The situation gradually stabilized, and the wave of beasts ended. Just as the military was about to excitedly get in touch with this mythical man, Hurlus dashed toward the forest and disappeared, clearly showing his intention of not wanting to expose his identity. Hurlus was somewhat conflicted. Getting in touch with the military meant his peaceful life in the past would be gone. He would have to walk the path of people like Furness and become the guardian of the race. Although whether he did become a guardian or not depended on his choice, Hurlus felt that he would not be able to leave himself out of it by then. Furthermore, the superiors would definitely request him to give up his commander-class armor to the race for research purposes. Hurlus took it as a precious inheritance from Delvis, so he was very conflicted. Although he stood out now to protect the race, and his varied responsibility was awakening slowly, someone this strong would not change his personality overnight. In the following few days, Hurlus was torn between the choices. While he appeared to help, the military kept trying to discover his identity, but every time that the battle ended, he left quickly and kept his mystery. A few days later, the whisper in everyone's mind suddenly disappeared. The catastrophe had ended. The beast wave in the middle of attacking suddenly paused. Countless beasts awoke from their bloodlust, stopped running, looked around, and ran in all directions, disappearing. The catastrophe is finally gone. Han Xiao took a deep breath. Soldiers lay down in exhaustion one after another, unable to move. Their bodies had reached their limits, and the surviving soldiers were way too tired. The logistics team cleaned up the battlefield, pulling soldiers out of their armor and sending them into the medical room one after another. The military was recovering and resting, as countless people in the city triumphed over the broadcast from their television. The end of every catastrophe was like surviving through a disaster. As per tradition, there would be a celebration a few days later, appreciating the army's contribution and mourning the lost soldiers. This kind of celebration filled with the feeling of a ritual was beneficial to increasing a race's unity, relaxing their tightened nerves, making the people laugh and cry, getting rid of the negative emotions, and once again feeling hopeful for the future. However, this time was completely different. Only 1 hour after the catastrophe ended, Furna's cold face appeared on the television everywhere. My fellow men, I'm Furnace. I believe many people know me. I want to make an announcement. From today, on behalf of 40% of the supers, the people you call guardians, we will be leaving planet Sunil and never return. The words he used were very firm, saying that they had done enough and were now going to search for freedom, not giving their lives to the race anymore. The Sunils felt like a bucket of ice had been poured over them. The happiness and passion from getting through the catastrophe vanished, and they were all stunned. What is this? Why is it so sudden? The superiors of the military were shocked. They had absolutely no idea about this beforehand. Far away in the forest, Hurla saw Furna's announcement from the internal terminal in his armor, and he mumbled in disbelief, why not leave quietly? This way, the people will. With the announcement, the whole of planet Sunil was shocked. The people felt confused and lost, they did not know the reasons behind it. All they knew was that the guardians whom they had always relied on were abandoning them. Why? Why? No one kept silent. Despair, desperation, hopelessness. Howling, wailing, growling. This was the collapse of belief. Even the minority that was unsatisfied with the supers felt endless panic when they saw this. This shocked the entire race. Furnace appeared with the other supers that decided to leave and walked outside. The Sunil soldiers looked at them in disbelief, yet they still opened a path for them. This time, another group of people swarmed over with rage and shock, including Lurden. Sunil supers were divided into two groups, one announcing their leave from the race, another shocked and furious. They stood against each other from far away with clear separation. The anticipation of a good show appeared on the faces of mercenaries, who were waiting for their reward. Han Xiao leaned his back against a tank, looked at the scene, squinted his eyes and thought, and so it begins. He had only read about the Sunil supers splitting up from the news. This time, he could witness it happening. The report had referred to the people including Furnace who were leaving the Independence faction, and the ones protecting the Race Guardian faction. Why are you doing this? A person from the Guardian faction said furiously. Furnace gave him a cold glare and said, I explained it very clearly, don't feign ignorance. I know you people must have thought about long ago. In the past many years, how many of our brothers were sacrificed? How many of our brothers became disabled? We have done enough. The people of Guardian faction's expressions changed a bit. Indeed, similar thoughts had crossed their minds before. In most of the people present, few people could stay firm from the start to the end. Furthermore, they had been traveling in the colorful galaxy and had seen how alluring it was. Some people escaped their expanding desires, some people let it grow. But, Lurden clenched his teeth and said, if you want to leave, you could have just left quietly. Why announce it openly? You are destroying the hope of the RAC. Furnace cut Lurden off. So what? The people of Guardian faction were shocked. They felt that the once firm and reliable Furnace had become a stranger. The two parties were in a stalemate, and the Sunil soldiers gradually surrounded them. Further away, the mercenaries took out snacks and focused on this show with excitement on their faces. Han Xiao casually grabbed a strange cigarette that looked like a cigar, took a deep breath, and shrugged. See, this is the ending of a long-distance relationship. Brilliant. The other mercenaries laughed. Mercenaries were a group of cold and unsympathetic people. Han Xiao had a very open mind. The split of the Sunils was fated, opening the curtain of the end of the Sunil civilization and the start of Hurla's story. He was just a spectator for now. Only when the Sunil split up and chaos fell would he be able to take part. Until things unfolded naturally, he could only wait. Furthermore, with him taking part, splitting up might not lead to the tragic ending in the original storyline but a new start instead. Since he could also benefit from it, this was a win-win. Smoke rose up and covered Han Xiao's narrowed eyes. Chapter 350, Settlement. Splitting up was certain. The Independence faction had made up their mind for leaving. Understandably, the Guardian faction was shocked and angry. They could have defended the race together, but now, there were people who had betrayed them and were leaving. Furthermore, they had heavily smashed what they had once protected. The Guardian faction was emotional, and they questioned the deserters loudly. "You're a Sunil, too. In the brink of danger, how can you abandon your race?" Furness was expressionless. "My race, my looks, my life form, these factors that were decided from the moment I was born cannot decide my mindset and standpoint. I have made my contributions, and now I want a new life." The Guardian faction still wanted to question them, but they saw that the faces of the Independence faction had absolutely no signs of regret or shame. Speechless, the words of accusation became stuck in their throats. The people they were facing were all brothers who had once fought alongside them. They had all shed sweat and blood. They were not enemies, just comrades that were taking a different path. They were not in a position to accuse the Independence faction. Everyone had their own desires. Furness pushed aside the people in his way as the Independence faction strolled away. The Sunil soldiers and the Guardian faction silently stared at their shrinking backs. This time, every Sunil seemed to see the dark and grey future. The sound of sobbing started faintly, and even the soldiers who did not fear even death were tearing up. This was the collapse of the spiritual pillar in their hearts. In all these years, the supers guarding the race had become spiritual totems and motivation for the Sunils. Sometimes, the collapse of the spiritual pillar can have a blow even heavier than an exterior disaster on a group. Han Xiao shook his head. The Sunil after disaster was like a tough disabled man, and the parts lost on his body did not defeat him. He still had the determination and motivation to continue. His mind was healthy, but when even the belief collapsed, he became disabled in his mind too, losing the strength to move forward. Therefore, the impact of the split in the race was not just the decrease in the number of supers, it had made a deep impact on the spirits of the people and the tough quality of the race. The way that Hurlas became the main character was when the position of Furness and the other supers who were once heroes faded away, and the superiors made him the new role model and spiritual motivation, signifying that there were still people who held on. In his previous life, Hurlas' future position had even exceeded Furness' old position. If Furness was the representative of changing from kindness and passion into tiredness and coldness, and Lurton was the representative of redeeming his sins, Hurlas would be the representative of someone who had previously avoided the reality then awoken his sense responsibility. After the Sunils went through the disaster, the mindset of the race changed continuously, from hot-blooded to indifference, then from the indifference they found a belief of determination. The belief collapsed during the split up, and Hurlas' appearance was building a new belief in the ruins, giving this race a new quality. His experience and actions gave his lost race a reason to regain their determination, staggering in pain and hardship, but still marching forward. The conflict in his heart was a scaled-down reflection of the entire race. Unlike Bennett, who was building sanctuaries far away on planet Aquamarine and had developed a firm belief long ago, Hurlas was a main character who was still growing. Thinking of the path that this whole thing took in his previous life, the great mechanic Han sighed. Sadly, water can carry a boat but could also sink one. When Hurlas died in battle, the Sunils gave up struggling and jumped into Godara's arms. The Independence faction left the defense ring and entered the forest. They were planning to find a place and contact a galactic travel agency, never to return. Suddenly, a person appeared before them. It was that mysterious armored warrior. Furness and the others stopped their footsteps. Hurlas took off his helmet and said with a complicated expression, "Why? You found me before leaving because you wanted me to replace you to protect the race, but what you're doing now is destroying the race's belief." Furness looked at him coldly, shook his head, and said, "If I don't leave, how are you going to replace me?" Anger appeared in Hurlas' eyes. "Because of such a boring reason. I actually really despise you. You have such strong powers, but you're fine with staying at the back lines. You are in no position to talk down to me." Furness' expression was indifferent. "Now, You have displayed your strength and exposed your armor. The race will definitely search for you with all of their might. You cannot go back anymore. Hurla suddenly realized. You used me for your plan. Don't think too highly of yourself. Ferna's eyes were firm as he said coldly, everyone has experienced a lot of things. Why would we change our mind because of a minor character like you? Leaving is for our own sake, just like the brothers who decided to stay. Even if us splitting up has made a negative impact, their foolish resolve to protect the race will not be shaken. I will say the same thing, only staying alive is important. I want the entire race to not have that extravagant wish of holding on. This meaningless struggle has to end. Accept help from Godara willingly, and no one will have to bleed and fight anymore. All Sunils will gain a peaceful and stable life. This path is the true way to protect the race. Hurlus opened his mouth, and Han Xiao's face appeared in his mind again. He had once told Furness about the future of accepting help, but Furness held onto his opinion and was not shaken at all. He felt it was the wrong foresight. With nothing else to say, the Independence faction left. Hurlus hesitated for quite some time, then gradually made up his mind. He left the forest and took large steps toward the defense ring. The army was still reeling in shock from the split up. When they noticed that this mysterious armored warrior had appeared, they only remembered the order from above after being stunned for quite a while. They arranged their emotions, suppressed the loss in their heart, and prioritized the order to surround him. In front of countless soldiers, Hurlus took off his helmet slowly, glanced around exhausted both physically and spiritually, and took a deep breath. My name is Hurlus. To the entire Sunil race, this catastrophe was full of twists and turns. The Guardians split up after the battle, but the legendary Commander class armor appeared again when the hidden Grade B super called Hurlus stood up to protect the race. After a few days in his new role, the media spread Hurlus' experience all over, building him up as a hero that stood out in the time of need. It was also reported that the research lab would receive more funding after receiving the Commander class armor, hoping that the race would one day get back the technology of the Commander class armor. Thus, they managed to use Hurlus and their future plans to wash away the impact from the mass desertion. With the army and the leaders working together to spread the word, Hurlus' name was known everywhere, gradually becoming a new role model for the race. The Sunil settled the hiring reward, and the mercenaries left one after another. During the times of fighting alongside each other, Han Xiao had come to know quite many peers. They had quite pleasant conversations, and the other mercenaries had a very good impression on the Black Star mercenary group, which had suffered zero loss, showing their friendliness. Mercenaries like to know people in the same industry. After all, they might one day fight alongside each other one day. The players returned, and the Sunil military expressed their thanks to the Black Star mercenary group before giving out the reward. Every player received 12,000 INAs, largely increasing their purchasing power. As the leader, Han Xiao received the same amount as well, and along with the job of battlefield repairs, the great mechanic Han made 16,000 INAs this time, about enough to buy more class advancement knowledge. Chapter 351, The Black Star Will Bless You. Through battlefield repairs, Han Xiao had gotten a few new blueprints, including the hovering turner, high-caliber defensive machine gun, and the offensive, defensive, and scouting enlistee class armor. As he expected, the NCO class armor required heavy machinery modification, so the progress was stuck. The great mechanic Han was not one to return with nothing, so using his relationship with the military, he bought 3 different types of NCO class armors with 2,000 or so INAs. When he returned to the Ubaili hub and learned heavy machinery modification, he would be able to get its blueprint. He would then build the different sets of armor and sell them to the players. The cost of buying the armor could easily be earned back. Everyone received 12,000, so their purchasing power is largely increased. Han Xiao was exuberant. This kind of mass-produced armor sold very well, and its attributes could be increased just by him putting in some experience to level up the blueprint. Furthermore, he had the boost from machinery affinity, so the armor that he produced would be much better than the ones from assembly lines. After selling them, he could still earn from long-term repair fees. The commission that he received from the hire could only buy about 1 class advancement knowledge, but through profiting from the players, that earning could be multiplied many times. The credibility points of the Black Star mercenary group increased quite a bit, and they finally had their first combat mission experience. The Sunils detailed their missions, including them requesting for the most dangerous missions and completing it perfectly without any deaths. This new information was very valuable. The relationship with the Sunil was unlocked, and it increased to 1000 points immediately, reaching the friendly level. On top of all that, their renown increased 5 points as well, 2 points more than the original reward, so Black Star's name started to spread around the mercenary industry. The most direct increase was the faction's single mission reward quota was increased by 10,000 experience, which meant that there was 260,000 more daily experience due to the 26 times multiplier. After the rewards were given, the mercenaries left one after another, but Han Xiao stayed in Forest City. The players stayed for a few days and got a little impatient. On this day, the players found Han Xiao, and Frenzied Sword asked, "Black Phantom, you call me Black Star?" Han Xiao knocked on Frenzied Sword's head. Frenzied Sword then said, "Black Star, when are we going back? What are we staying here for? Waiting for someone?" The players thought that after the catastrophe ended so did this hiring mission, but in Han Xiao's eyes, it was just the beginning. One day later, the Sunil military sent someone to tell Han Xiao that Hurlis wanted to meet him. Han Xiao narrowed his eyes and smiled. Finally, following the soldiers to a base facility, he entered a private room, where Hurlis was waiting. The man stood up, waved, and sent the soldiers away. He then closed the door, leaving the two of them alone in the room. There were 2 glasses of alcohol on the table. Han Xiao glanced around and sat down directly. "I thought you'd find me sooner. It was delayed by something. I had to fully cooperate with the military for publicity and lend the armor that my older brother left me to the research institution." Hurlis sighed. He had never expected to receive such treatment, but it was mainly caused by 3 reasons. Firstly, they needed to wash away the effect of the split up. Secondly, Hurlis was strong, and strength signified position. There were only 2 known grade B supers in the entire race. Furnace had left, and Hurlis had appeared. Thirdly, they now had a chance to resurrect the commander class armor. "You seem to have many questions for me, but first let me ask you a question." Han Xiao raised the glass up, swirled it gently, and purposely said in a very slow tone, "Do you believe I'm a foreseer?" "Have." Hurlis' eyes were sparkling. "Did you foresee the future of me protecting the race long ago, and that was why you came to contact me?" "Of course, I didn't know a bar owner is actually a hidden grade B super, and I also didn't know that he would wear a commander class armor called Shattered Light to fight the catastrophe," Han Xiao said mockingly. Hurlis smiled bitterly. No one knew his armor was called Shattered Light, so the foreseer identity was proved. Yet, that left him with another question. How many things can you foresee? How far can you see into the future? Ha ha ha, frankly, I can only foresee parts of the future, bits and pieces. I don't know much. If I didn't accidentally peek into Planet Sunil's future, I wouldn't have come, Han Xiao said sincerely without even blinking. I see, although I don't know much about the galaxy, I did hear that foresight usually has limitations. Hurlis understood, and he was glad that Han Xiao had seen Planet Sunil's future instead of something else's future. Maybe this was the long-awaited luck of his race. Suddenly, Hurlis' eyes became sharp. He stared at Han Xiao and said in a low voice, "So, what is your real motive?" The atmosphere suddenly became intense, and faint flames flickered around Hurlis. He felt that Han Xiao definitely had a goal, or else he would not have exposed his foresight. This mysterious man definitely wanted something from the Sunil race. Han Xiao put the glass down and said slowly, "Let me tell you a story. In a planet where its surface civilization lagged behind, there was a handsome man who was a test subject. One day, he went through an experiment, awakened the ability of foresight, and saw many pieces of the future. Relying on his foresight, he escaped successfully and gained freedom. Then he destroyed the evil enemy of this planet, becoming a legend known throughout the entire planet. However, at this time, he saw a new future. A man-made disaster from the sky would fall on his mother planet. The people behind it hid in the depths of the universe, so he left the planet and stepped into a broader world, searching for ways to save his mother planet." Han Xiao adjudged his collar. "Naturally, I am that handsome man." Hurlis suddenly could not keep a serious face, and his lips started twitching. He did not know if calling oneself like that was common in the galaxy, but it was shameless in the Sunil culture. "We are from different races, so it's normal to have aesthetic differences," Han Xiao said. "Okay." After being momentarily stunned, Hurlis suddenly remembered what they were discussing. "So, you're saying that you entered the universe to save your mother planet?" What does that have to do with Sunil? Han Xiao smiled. My mother planet is located in the Garden Galaxy, soon to face a disaster. I think you Sunils are more than familiar with the name of the people behind it. Hurles blinked a few times, then his expression suddenly changed. Dark Star. He suddenly felt that everything made sense, and everything was connected. Dark Star was their common enemy, therefore, he came to Sunil. This was the motive. The mercenaries under me are warriors from my planet as well, Han Xiao added. They know of this as well, and they followed me because they wanted to search for a way to save the planet. They can vouch for me anytime. I helped you not only because we will share the same tragic experience but also because I'm looking for an ally. Since you know why I came, you don't have to worry anymore. Hurles' expression softened, and he was immediately filled with respect for Han Xiao. So, you're the same as the guardians of Sunil, a hero wanting to protect his planet. Without any blushing, Han Xiao said with humility, I'm not a hero. I just have responsibilities on my shoulders. The great mechanic Han felt like he had traveled back in time when he acted like he was brainwashed. Giving an Oscar-worthy performance, his actor's soul was on fire. This moment, Hurles felt that Han Xiao looked much taller and greater, and he felt a bit ashamed. Han Xiao had the resolve to immediately look for ways to save his planet just because he foresaw parts of the future. He was a complete doer. He, however, even after his race went through a disaster, still escaped from reality for so many years. Just thinking about it made his face hot. He was ashamed and could not remain tough in front of Han Xiao anymore. Chapter 352, Dropping a Chess Piece in the Galaxy. Upon understanding Han Xiao's reasoning, Hurles' expression softened. He paused before asking the question that he had been curious about. What's my future like? You, Han Xiao picked his ear, tooted, and said, you sacrificed yourself during the catastrophe, dying a horrible death. Oh, how horrible. Hurles' face froze. Han Xiao grabbed the glass, tightened his grip, and shattered it into pieces. Then he shrugged and said, something like that. With a doubtful expression, Hurles said, although I'm not one of those grade A supers, the beasts on this planet are not strong enough to slaughter me. From the parts I saw, the beast wave breached Forest City. You firmly defended the opening and fought till your last breath, using up all your energy. Alas, you were torn apart by the beast wave. Hurles was surprised. He knew himself too well, and protecting the race was taking on a supposed responsibility. However, he definitely did not have the strength to never retreat even in his last breath. If he met lethal danger, he would run away immediately. How could he become so firm? How far in the future is that? With a shrug, Han Xiao said, do you think I'm some spirit emperor who's worshipped by the ethereal sect? I'm just a normal foreseer, not all-knowing. He knew that he could not be too ahead when playing a foreseer. It was for his own protection and to make Hurles guess. Han Xiao knew Hurles' growth path very well. He would become a selfless hero of the race in the future. As a main character that was growing, he was young, unlike Bennett who had completely matured. Seeing Hurles frown, Han Xiao's eyes sparkled, and he said, what I saw were just the parts of the future from the existing scenario. If there are other factors at play, the future will change too. With Sunil's current situation, the catastrophe will become harder and harder for you people to deal with, but that future can be avoided. Hearing that made Hurles feel relieved. Han Xiao said that his foreseeing ability had limitations, which Hurles thought was more trustworthy. He would easily doubt those people who claim to know everything. You said you have a solution? Hurles asked sincerely. Sunil's current situation is very bad. The catastrophe is the most obvious danger, and the retreating route toward Godara is unsafe. Plus, Dark Star is hiding in the darkness. If you rise up again, you might face Dark Star's attack. Han Xiao gave a simple analysis, and Hurles' expression gradually turned grimmer. The Sunils faced danger from everywhere. Hurles could not figure out a solution, only feeling that the road ahead was filled with darkness. That means Sunil has no way out. Of course not, the way out has always been obvious, but you people subconsciously did not think in that direction. Han Xiao smiled knowingly. Obvious. Hurles was a little surprised. He frowned and thought for a while. Suddenly, his eyes widened, and he exclaimed, you're saying, to destroy Dark Star. If Dark Star is destroyed, the largest threat will no longer exist, but we are incapable of that. Hurles widened his eyes. He did not expect Han Xiao to be this ambitious. This idea was completely insane. Dark Star has destroyed the home of many civilizations, Han Xiao said calmly. They're notorious in the Garden Galaxy, and even in the entire Colton star cluster. Comparing them with you people is like comparing a giant to an ant. However, they're not invincible, or they would not hide from Godara. You people have always ignored this possibility, and it's because of nothing other than the fear toward Dark Star, which is now deep-rooted in your hearts. You don't even dare to think about it, you feel it can never be done. It really cannot be done. Dark Star is too large and mysterious. I vividly remember every scene back when Dark Star attacked us. Countless battleships covered the sky as well as countless laser beams, the planet's crust cracked, lava shot out. Han Xiao cut him off, shook his head, and said, Dark Star has many enemies. There are potential allies everywhere. Other than this path, you can only join Godara. If you are willing to give up, you will not have to fight the catastrophe. I didn't say to fight Dark Star right now, this is just the final target. Before that, we need to hoard our resources and stay low profile. You really are daring, Hurlus shook his head. The hope is too little. I don't think this is a good solution. As if he had expected such a response, Han Xiao smiled. He did not plan on convincing Hurlus with such a large target, he just threw it out to broaden Hurlus' mindset. Thus, he changed the subject and said, let's put Dark Star aside for now. Regardless of whether your race rises up in the future or not, the imminent problem has to be dealt with first. Sunil's largest issue right now is exploring this planet and dealing with the catastrophe. About this, I have a very direct solution. Hurlus became more focused. Plans regarding Dark Star were too far away, and the catastrophe was an imminent and real disaster that he was more concerned about. What solution do you have? I can bring many supers here. Hurlus had thought that he would hear some brilliant solution, but Han Xiao's solution was similar to Sunil hiring mercenaries. After all, the many in Han Xiao's sentence was surely at most thousands. Hurlus was disappointed, and it showed on his face. Just supers is not enough. Not enough. Han Xiao smiled mysteriously. Then what about hundreds of thousands of supers? Hundreds of thousands. Hurlus' expression said, do you think I'm 3 years old? A small mercenary from a surface civilization, how can you find so many people to help? Furthermore, supers. Did simplicity limit my imagination? I can bring waves of people even more horrifying than the catastrophe. They don't fear death, they are brave, and they can fight well. Not just for the catastrophe, they can also help you explore the planet during the rest of the time, digging prophecy stone veins, and what they need is just a small reward. At this moment, Han Xiao smiled brightly. This was his biggest target of the trip. He was interested in the NPC resources of the entire race. If the players were seeds, these NPCs were the soil. Sunil was just a start, the Great Mechanic Han's plan was much deeper and longer than that. In the late stage of version 2.0, Planet Aquamarine's players would start to enter the galaxy through guidance from a galactic organization. Han Xiao wanted to replace that galactic organization and become a mentor. The players knew nothing as they took their first steps into the vast galaxy, so it was the best time to be convinced. If he could give them guidance in a similar way to when he guided the new players in the novice village, he would be able to guide the players into their next area of activity. Han Xiao wanted to turn his own faction into the faction that the players joined after they entered the galaxy, to make it a compulsory part of their player career. If he succeeds, he could have every player in Planet Aquamarine join his faction. After all, he had already made a strong impression in the hearts of the Planet Aquamarine players. To guide the players through their galaxy career, other than the rewards, there was another thing that had to be present, NPC resources. Although the galaxy was vast, the players would need time and a stable activity area for them to develop themselves, and the best way would be to have one or more storylines to lead their activities. This was why Han Xiao targeted NPC organizations. Not only could they provide NPC resources, they also had storylines. Black Star Mercenary Group gave many rewards, and with Bun Hit Dog's videos that helped to spread publicity, it was very attractive, but that was not enough. Faction rewards had a quota, and it was an indirect limitation to the number of members. However, if he could come to an agreement with some organizations, guiding the players there for missions and monster killing, he could break through this limitation. It was reaping the benefits of other NPCs. Since he needed help from other NPCs, he had to emphasize on what his faction could provide in order to let the players realize the benefits of joining the Black Star mercenary group. Other than reward and item exchanges, there had to be privileges. As such, if he became an ally with some organizations, players in Black Star mercenary group would receive better treatment from that organization, or he could put prerequisites in certain areas, and joining the Black Star mercenary group could grant them access to better areas for development. Through various methods, he would make sure that the players knew that not only was Black Star mercenary group full of rewards, it would also give them many indirect benefits. One special characteristic of a mercenary group was that the members could be spread out across maps, which was an advantage of his faction. The players would get access to areas to do missions and ally with organizations to receive help. His faction would further develop, and in turn, he would reap benefits. This was a win for multiple parties. The players were like manpower resources, and these organizations in need of help were like the customers looking for hire. His faction would be the middleman to provide them with manpower, but the difference was, all of these manpower resources belonged to his faction, the middleman. These were just considerations from the perspective of benefits. Another way to look at it would be from the perspective of emotions. Most mercenary groups did not have a history, and through helping NPC organizations and having the players experience the storyline of these NPC organizations, it would give the players a stronger sense of reality. The mercenary group, as the bridge connecting these storylines together, would then become something that went through ups and downs with these players, adding history to the mercenary group, hence enhancing the sense of belonging that the players would have for the mercenary group. The players not only needed benefits but also good stories, only then would they feel the role-playing part of a role-playing game, hence feeling a sense of belonging for the faction. Therefore, Han Xiao decided to shape a common enemy, and Dark Star was the most suitable target. Working together to fight against a common enemy was the easiest way to develop a sense of belonging. Thus, the Sunil race, which had a deep-seated hatred toward Dark Star, was a very suitable ally. Furthermore, by introducing NPC organization areas to the players by the mercenary group, it could develop a blurry sense of territorial awareness in the players, which would also indirectly increase the attractiveness of his faction. Emotions like a sense of belonging could bring many long-term benefits, even exceeding the attractiveness of the reward itself. Players were the representatives of chaos, and the great mechanic Han always did everything that he could to shape himself as one of them among the players, to become a shadow that followed every step that the players took in their gaming career. Developing a faction was a key component to achieving this target. His plot was enormous, but it needed time to slowly make it a reality. For now, he had merely taken the first step. Chapter 353, Abducting a Man. Herles was filled with doubts. Just as he was going to say something, Han Xiao spoke first. Don't be too quick to make an assumption. Not long ago, you didn't believe that I was a foreseer. If you hadn't changed your mind, this meeting wouldn't have taken place. I don't need you to believe it right now, but think about this, do I have any reason to lie to you? Sunil's never promised me any benefits, and even if what I said is not true, you people will not suffer any loss. That's true. Herles nodded and agreed. Indeed, even if Han Xiao was lying, his race would only maintain its current state. Herles actually wished that what Han Xiao said to be true. If they had so much help, their losses during the catastrophe would be vastly reduced, and they would be able to develop much quicker. Although there was the potential threat from Dark Star, the Sunil civilization was just a tiny shrimp to them. As long as they kept a low profile, they would be able to grow stronger in the environment filled with danger. With a solemn face, Herles said in a low voice, if you really can help us overcome these obstacles, Sunil will be your firmest ally. I cannot decide for the entire race, but I believe that the leaders will definitely make the same decision. Please believe in the resolve and quality of us Sunils. Of course, I never doubted that. Han Xiao's compliment made Herles feel very delighted. About your standpoint, I'll immediately report to the superiors. Han Xiao waved and said, I suggest that you don't say it yet. A surprise is better than a torturous wait. Plus, your words alone might not be enough to convince the superiors of your race to believe that I'm a foreseer. Herles was stunned for a moment, then said while thinking, that's true. If I guessed correctly, just like the other supers, you're heading toward the galaxy to become a mercenary as well, right? Han Xiao said. Yes, I've stayed here for too long. It's time for me to go out and make some contributions. I'll be leaving in 2 days. Herles nodded. Although he was very strong, he had never explored the galaxy alone. Han Xiao's eyes sparkled, and he smiled. Since we have come to an agreement, how about you join my mercenary group and become my associate? This moment, Han Xiao felt like he was blessed by the soul of Luffy One. If combined with the sun behind him, outstretched arms, and hot-blooded background music, he felt like he could trigger the super strong buff plus 100% recruit success rate. Join your Black Star mercenary group, Hurles was tempted. He was going to become a mercenary anyway, and working in groups would not only mean a stronger power, but he could also stay in touch with Han Xiao in the long term to witness his actions and confirm whether what he had said was true or not. If Han Xiao was sincere in helping Sunil, he would have the chance to pay him back and help Han Xiao save his mother planet. Plus, the two of them could have detailed discussions on how to combat the Dark Star and improve on their plan. It would really be very convenient. Furthermore, Han Xiao was very important to Sunil. They could not allow an accident happen to him, so if they were acting together, he would be able to protect him. After all, Han Xiao's strength in Hurles' eyes was not considered strong at all, mediocre at best. He's one grade lower than me, so being a mercenary is dangerous for him. If I follow him, I can prevent him from dying accidentally. After careful consideration, Hurles felt that such a course of action was very advantageous, so he agreed on the spot. Okay, I'll join your mercenary group. Han Xiao nodded calmly, but in his heart, he was laughing uncontrollably. Finally. All my effort in convincing him did not go to waste. I finally abducted this main character. Other than the point of contact of Sunil, Hurles would also be an NPC coder of the mercenary group itself. He was a high-level combat power. This job has resulted in great benefits. Their conversations' details were not reported to the superiors, just as Han Xiao suggested. The rest of the Sunils did not know, only Hurles. 2 days later, the galactic travel agency that they had called arrived at Planet Sunil. The group of players followed Han Xiao up the spaceship in anticipation. Suddenly, a tall and wide Sunil in casual clothes walked over. After staying so long in Forest City and seeing the promotions from the military, they immediately recognized that it was Hurles, the character who was being shaped as a hero figure. Where's your armor? Lent to the researcher institution. When they derive the blueprint, I can take it back to use, so I only brought this weapon. Hurles turned sideways, displaying the rectangular metal silver block tied behind his back. It was the folded battleship slicing blade. I see, Han Xiao felt a little disappointed. The commander-class armor was a piece of great equipment, but he did not even meet the prerequisite of the NCO-class armor yet. Commander-class would be even more impossible for him to derive. There would be chances in the future anyway, so there was no need to be impatient. Han Xiao turned to the players and made the introduction. This is Hurles, a grade B super. From today onward, he'll be our comrade, a new member of our mercenary group. Holy! The players' jaw almost dropped on the floor. They were stunned. The captain has abducted the hero of a race. Why did you join us? What's your class? Did you make some kind of deal with Black Star? They were very curious about this new friend and overwhelmed him with questions. Hurles was surrounded in the middle and felt the passion from his teammates. He was very not used to it, and he was forcing a smile. The result of the detection from players was all question marks. They were very curious as to how Han Xiao got in touch with a grade B super. This was someone who was at the top of high-level areas, probably the strongest in their mercenary group. Someone who was even stronger than Han Xiao joining their faction had made the players very excited. After some time, the spaceship slowly landed. Hurles finally escaped from the players and walked to Han Xiao. He stood beside Han Xiao, looking up at the spaceship, and his face was a little stiff. Han Xiao turned to look at him, raised an eyebrow, and said, "You seem to be a little nervous. Have you never been into the galaxy before?" "This is my first time." Hurles rubbed his hands against each other to wipe his sweat off. "I'm actually a little scared of heights." "You're a shame to pugilists." Han Xiao was speechless. They boarded the spaceship. It slowly rose and flew into space with Forest City becoming smaller in their sight. This hiring job was finally complete, and they had left with one more member than when they came. The catastrophe on planet Sunil was very beneficial for all of them, especially Han Xiao. Planting the seed in Sunil this time means I'm on track with the Dark Star storyline. The first step of the plan is also complete. Han Xiao crossed his arms as he pondered. The spaceship's destination was Ubaili Hub. Before the next operation, Han Xiao wanted to return to rest and digest the things that they had earned on this trip. In Forest City, one of the military bases was open as a recruitment site. After the catastrophe, it was the time for new soldiers to join the army again. Youngsters coming of age had to join the compulsory military service and undergo military training. Youngsters came one after another, accompanied by their parents. Lana was very early. He was only allowed into the recruitment site after displaying his ID card. Any unauthorized personnel were not allowed in, including parents. When he turned back to look, Lana saw his parents waving. They had kind and loving smiles on their faces as usual. He looked at them with a lot of emotions in his eyes, then followed the group into the military base. After queuing for a very long time, it was finally Lana's turn. The officer sitting behind the table said casually without even raising his head, "Name, then take a number to go for a medical examination." Lana took a deep breath before saying seriously, "Sir, I'd like to request to join the army." The officer looked up and glanced at him. "Do your parents know?" "No." "Youngster, your parents definitely warned you not to join the army, didn't they?" "Yes sir, but I believe I'm making the right decision." "Once the request is approved, you have to be fully responsible for your decision," the officer said coldly. "You won't be allowed to take it back, are we clear?" "Crystal clear." A slight smile appeared on the officer's cold face. He opened a drawer, inside which was a thick stack of army application forms. He took one out and passed it to Lana. Lana was about to take it, but he realized that the officer was holding onto the application form too tightly. At that moment, the officer said coldly, "This is your last chance to change your mind." Lana snatched the application form with a firm expression. "Good, the area to join the army is at that side. Don't block the people behind." Lana followed the officer's finger and looked over. It was an empty warehouse that served as the recruitment site for the official army. Youngsters waiting to fill out their application forms had already filled the entire warehouse. Chapter 354, Speeding. 1. After a month on planet Sunil, Han Xiao and the others finally returned to Ubaili Hub. As soon as they were in the hub hall, the first thing that Han Xiao did was change the medium resting room into a large stronghold. The rental increased, from 40 to 100 in as did the space. The better the faction's base looked, the more reliable the players would feel. Han Xiao actually thought that a spaceship was the best mobile base, but a spaceship was way too expensive, they would not be able to afford one even if they sold the kidneys of all the players. The human body did not sell very well in the galactic organ market after all. Excess money was meant for splurging. The consumption concept of a mechanic was always money spent will always make returns. This trip was very profitable. More than 10,000 had landed in the players' pockets, and Han Xiao would take that off their hands to gather the funds to buy 2-class advancement knowledges. Pro players will always use their residual money to buy equipment. There were private equipment stores in Ubaili Hub, and these were all Han Xiao's competitors. "It's impossible to have the players only buy things from me. Players have their personal preferences, so I can't rob away their freedom, or it will be bad for faction development. Nobody likes to be forced. Plus, the things I sell might not satisfy all of their needs. Anyway, I only need a part of the player's fortune, and the profit is high enough." Although Han Xiao had plenty of ways to make money, he always kept that desire controlled. He updated the faction exchange list, adding offensive, defensive, and scouting enlistee class armor, with a prerequisite of 500 faction relationship points. Then he set the exchange price at 800 in as. In the new stronghold, before the players had started roaming outside, someone had already discovered the new items in the faction shop. "Is this the enlistee class armor that we saw in Sunil?" Frenzied Sword said in surprise. "It is their technology indeed," Hao Tian said. "Why can we purchase another organization's equipment from the faction?" The players became curious. Bun Hit Dog had a flash of insight and gave a sensible guess. A mercenary group might be a faction with growing potential. After completing different mission hires, the faction shop will be updated. The more missions completed, the larger the faction will grow. The players thought of Hurless joining and the growth potential on the faction interface when they first joined Black Star, and they felt it made sense. Instantly, they became excited. The actions of the players could make the faction grow. "We might have joined a special faction." Frenzied Sword was overjoyed. They were all pro players, so they immediately realized the advantages of the mercenary group. If they underwent missions from different organizations, the exchange list would be updated with equipment from those organizations, which meant that the more missions they did, the richer the faction exchange list would become. All they had to do was increase the relationship points with the faction itself. It would save them a lot of time. They were the first batch of players entering the galaxy, and they had gone through a very difficult selection process. Was joining this faction a hidden benefit? The players felt that the specialness of the mercenary group came from Han Xiao. After all, storyline main characters would definitely possess something special. The players trusted Han Xiao very strongly. No matter how shocking the things that he did were, it all seemed possible. This was the impression that Han Xiao had forged in the players' minds. To make the players feel that the growth of the faction was driven by them, when they clearly saw the growth of the faction, they would slowly develop a sense of belonging. This was the development path that he had set from the start. Now, the players finally felt this specialness and freshness. His strategy had achieved its anticipated result. At this time, the players had money in their pockets and were willing to spend. A few of them bought the enlistee class armor on the spot. Han Xiao did not have any completed products with him, so it had to be built. The other players wanted to observe when the finished product was made. During the battle on Sunil, every player had been tempted by the single unit armors, but sadly, they had not been given a way to purchase them. Second Prince almost wanted to steal one. We have battled for more than a month, let's all take a break and rest for some time. Han Xiao dismissed them, left the stronghold, and rented a mechanical modification room. He first spent millions of experience and upgraded the armor blueprint level to LV.6, only then did he start to build. There was still a lot of material left from what he had brought from planet Aquamarine. Only a small part of the Sunil enlistee class armor required him to buy materials from the galaxy. The cost to make one was only about 50 INAs. For the time being, there was no mission for the mercenary group. The players could finally explore Ubairli hub freely, and naturally, they would not just spend money in one place. There were many shops in the hub center, and it was full of variety and choices. During this resting period, they witnessed equipment from many different civilizations and bought a lot of gear, such as arms with stronger power, small supportive machinery, and so on. At the same time, they noticed that some machinery shops were selling single-unit armors as well. This was very common in the galaxy, and although these armors' designs were very different from the ones on Sunil, their technology levels were all rather basic. However, these shops were selling them at a way higher price than exchanging in the faction. Even the cheapest one was 3,200 INAs, 4 times the faction price. The players became worried because of this. They knew that the price was usually correlated with quality, but Han Xiao's armor was so cheap. Would its attributes be very low? They memorized the attributes of the armor in the shop and planned to make a comparison when the finished product from the faction was complete. Although Black Star's equipment had good prices, when the pro players were rich, they never looked at price, only quality. Hurles went to the mercenary hall alone to register. He joined the Black Star mercenary group, then opened the mercenary group records. Black Star mercenary group. Credibility rating, 154. Scale, 53 members. Class C, 52 members. Class B, 1 member. Missions completed, 1, daily low-level missions excluded. Active region, Garden Galaxy. Records, Sunil Defense Battle, Expand/Collapse. Creator, Black Star, Han Xiao. Creation date, Galaxy Calendar Year 688, October 2nd. Summary, a small mercenary group with a certain amount of combat power and 1 grade B super. A mercenary group created little more than a month back. Black Star didn't lie to me. When Hurla saw there was only 1 grade B super, he knew that he was the strongest in this mercenary group. He could not help but feel a sense of responsibility. For the future of his race, he had to protect Han Xiao. He hoped that this captain would not choose hiring missions that were too dangerous. On the other side, Han Xiao received a notification from the interface while he was building armor in the workshop. Faction reward limit, 135,700. Faction leader level, 80, plus 64,000 reward quota. Cotters, Hurles, B, plus 20,000 reward quota. Faction size, 52, plus 20,000 reward quota. Renown, 7, plus 14,000 reward quota. Legendary points, leader, 3, plus 15% reward quota. Allies and enemies, none. His friendliness with Sunil was on a personal level, so it had yet to become a faction ally. Han Xiao felt refreshed. The faction had gained its first cadre and taken its first step. Plus, the quota had increased by 20,000, showing that recruiting cadres was indeed a good way to quickly increase the quota. 2 days later, Han Xiao had built 6 sets of enlistee class armor. The players could not wait to equip them, and they instantly felt the benefits of the armor. Single unit armor was something that most civilizations would research on when they reached a certain technological level. Its original purpose was to let users have stronger physical capabilities and adapt better to different environments. The first time wearing single unit armor was like opening the gate to a new world for the players. In the stronghold, a few players that bought the armor were controlling them excitedly. The fresh feeling had them overjoyed, and the other players surrounded them and touched the armor with curiosity. How does it feel? It looks heavy, but it's actually really easy to move. There are parts inside that helps me move. Rainy Kim frowned and said, piles of iron, they look so ugly. All the male players stared at her. It was the first time that they had shared a common enemy. You don't know sh*t. The mechanical suit is men's romance. Chapter 355, Speeding. 2. After playing with the armor for a while, only then did the players remember to compare the attributes between the Sunil soldier armor with the armor in the shops, and the result was that it was almost the same. Same quality, a quarter of the price. This was more than worth it. The players were over the moon. The rest of the players did not observe any more and paid willingly. 50-something people, more than 40,000 in as, about the price of 2 knowledges. Han Xiao smiled. There was more. Right after, he added a new option in the faction shop page: equipment enhancement. Han Xiao had held back when he built the armor. Their attributes were just the basic version. This was to provide room for enhancement so that he could open another revenue stream. Repairs and enhancements were long-term incomes. Han Xiao had multiple machinery enhancement abilities, so he had what it took to enter the enhancement business. Naturally, Han Xiao was not going to miss this opportunity. Also, he was going to control the level of enhancement that he gave and would not do full enhancements the very first time, leaving room for improvement, hence attracting the players to keep spending. The great mechanic Han was not greedy by dividing one thing and selling them separately. He could maximize his profits, and the players that did not know this were willing to pay for it. Han Xiao competed with other shops by using cheap, high-quality equipment, to first let the players buy the equipment, then introduce the enhancement option, turning a one-time sale into long-term profit. After all, he had occasionally played single-player games in his previous life too, and he was inspired by the gaming companies turning one game into several DLCs. Han Xiao felt nostalgic. Back when he was young, he had been an honest man, but his tiny and pure heart had become polluted by society. Turning bad was not one man's fault, it was the world's fault. For the following few days, Han Xiao built all the armor. Every player wore enlistee class armor. It was like the mercenary group had its uniform. Although the players were all supers, enlistee class armor still proved to be helpful. As a firm supporter of the great mechanic Han, Frenzied Sword was the first one to buy the enhancement. The attributes of the armor increased by around 10% after the enhancement. Multiple enhancements of the same equipment would have an increased cost. As for the enlistee class armor, the first enhancement only cost 60 in as, the second cost 100, and the third 150. Every fourth enhancement in a row, the price would have a big leap from the previous one. The fourth enhancement cost 300. The attributes increased by 8 to 12% every enhancement. It was low cost, high profit, and Frenzied Sword vouched for it. The others thought that it was a good deal and followed. After the Sunil mission, the players all had more than 10,000 in as, and it was burning a hole in their pockets. Han Xiao had left plenty of room for enhancements. When he made the armor, it had to be enhanced at least 7 times to reach the limit of his ability. The enhancement business made him 23,000 in as, which meant on average, the 50+ players all enhanced their armor at least 3 times. Han Xiao made 40,000 from selling the armor and 23,000 from enhancing them. Now with more than 67,000 in as in his account, he more than enough to buy knowledges. He was having a great time selling, while Hurles was speechless. He found Han Xiao and said with surprise, "How do you know our single unit armor technology?" He had built Sunil's armor, which would definitely make Hurles question him. Han Xiao laughed and said, I derived the blueprint during battlefield repairs. Aren't I very skilled? Hurles' face twitched. Han Xiao had stolen Sunil's technology, yet he had asked Sunil to complement his skill. Even his battleship slicing blade could not cut through skin this thick. Anyway, with Sunil at its current state, there was no point dwelling on this. Hurles still had to stay with Han Xiao, so he did not care about it. Furthermore, it was not any kind of rare technology. Most civilizations had basic single-unit armor, just with different styles. In the area exchange center of Ubaili Hub, Han Xiao was looking to buy some knowledge. Having finally made enough money, he was about to complete the class advancement that he had been stuck on for so long. It went without saying, he was quite excited. The Colton Star Cluster area only had 8 mechanic class advancement knowledges, and Han Xiao glanced through and swiftly chose 2. Heavy Machine Modification, selling at 25,000. Advanced Electromagnetism, selling at 37,000. Learning. Successfully learned. You have learned Heavy Machine Modification. Learning. Successfully learned. You have learned Advanced Electromagnetism. Class Advancement Requirements, LV80, 400 Intel, learned 5 Mechanic Class Advancement Knowledges. Class Advancement Succeed. LV80, Class Advancement Mission Completion Detected. Class Advancement Succeed. Endurance Attribute Boost Enhanced. 1 Endurance equals 40 max health equals 50 max stamina. You have received a new class, Data Mechanic LV1. Plus 100 Energy, plus 3 Dex, plus 2 Endurance, plus 4 Intel. You have received 5 free attribute points. You have received 1 potential point. You have acquired skill Blueprint Refinement. You have acquired skill High Concentration Refining. You have acquired skill Magnetic Vision Data Flow. You have acquired talent Machinery Analytical Comprehension. The energy in his body was cheering. His class advancement made Han Xiao feel like he had broken through some kind of shackle. His vision became black, and it felt like hours had passed. However, it was actually only half a second. His vision then recovered, but it was very different with before. He could sense much tinier things. Every time his strength increased, he felt like he had been reborn. Data Mechanic was also called Experienced Mechanic. His understanding of machinery became even better. The machinery affinity at this period would make a huge leap, and among the 4 new abilities that he had just received, Magnetic Vision Data Flow and Machinery Analytical Comprehension were both able to largely increase machinery affinity. Machinery affinity was a key attribute of the mechanic, representing the speed, attributes, and power of building and using machinery. Magnetic Vision Data Flow was an active skill, and after activating it, he would enter a special magnetic vision. His magnetic property energy would become his extended senses, revealing the details of the machinery with a magnetic field. Han Xiao immediately leveled up the skill to LV.10. Its effect was a 25 to 50% increase in machinery affinity with a 20 energy cost per minute. The percentage increase changed randomly every minute. As its cost was very low, this skill could be activated almost continuously. Unlike surging mechanical force, this skill could be used in the building process too. Machinery Analytical Comprehension was a passive talent, increasing machinery affinity directly according to intelligence. Its effect was very powerful. Every 10 intelligence increased machinery affinity by 1%. Han Xiao had more than 400 intelligence at this moment. This was a key ability for the current stage, increasing the benefit of the intelligence attribute toward mechanics. For the foreseeable future, this would be a core ability. High Concentration Refining was the upgraded version of basic refining. It increased the strength of the raw materials, a very important effect. Blueprint Refinement was a passive skill, and it had a chance to be triggered during equipment building. That equipment's blueprint level would temporarily increase by at most 3 levels, increasing the end product's attributes. There was also a chance to crit during the building process, resulting in an equipment of a higher grade. The chance depended on the user's intelligence and luck. Han Xiao still had 2,500,000,000 experience, so he immediately leveled up all those skills and talents to the max level, using close to 50 million at once. Then, Han Xiao also increased his main class to the max level, LV15. After LV80, the experience to level up multiplied. One level required tens of millions of experience, so leveling up 15 levels at once cost him 900 million experience. Yet, He did not even blink. Data mechanic leveled up to LV15, max. Plus 240 energy, plus 3 dex, plus 2 endurance, plus 4 intel times 15. You have received 5 free attribute points. You have received 1 potential point. From LV80 to LV95 in a flash. It even exceeded the max player level allowed in version 2.0. Han Xiao's advantages of being ahead were even more enlarged. Energy filled his body. If it had been a stream before, it was now a wide river. Han Xiao took a deep breath and felt the strength of his body. Reveling in the raging energy within him, he opened the interface, spending all the free attribute points in intelligence. Then, he observed his attributes go through astonishing changes. Level, 95. Main class, Mechanic. Attributes, 121 STR, 244 Dex, 214 Endurance, 570 Intelligence, 21 Mystic, 14 Charm, 1 Luck. Free attribute points, 0. Potential points, 82. Health, 13,057. Stamina, 15,420. Energy, 5,210, LV9. Power level, 5,377 ONA. Grade, B. You're a strong enough super, a pillar level even in the galaxy. With this level of strength, you're superior to most beings. I became grade B. Han Xiao smiled. 5,000 increase in just max health and a new attribute boost level when my energy reached 5,000. My attributes should be 30 to 40% higher than before. Finally, he was grade B. He could now protect himself to a certain level even in the galaxy. His combat power was far beyond grade C, and he had 2 new class advancement knowledges. His combat style could be improved once more. Chapter 356, Breaking News, Universe Royalties Reward. The prerequisite of the Sunil NCO class armor had been met, and Han Xiao could reverse engineer the armor and draw up the blueprint. He did not want to sell it to the players at the moment. After all, he had just finished selling the enlistee class armor, and releasing the new armor would affect the rewarding buff from the enlistee class armor. So, he chose to wait for a while. I have 5 class advancement knowledge in my hands right now. With all these new blueprints, I can finally upgrade my equipment. Han Xiao stroked his chin and fell into deep thought. He currently had 4 battle styles, the core Amphiptera, compounded magnetic chain split blades and thermoelectrical incisor gloves for close combat, sonic sphere for mid-range combat, and Wrath of Garrett while kiting for long-range combat. All 4 modes provided well-rounded combat abilities for Han Xiao. Heavy machine modification gave him the skill to create large-scale machinery, and advanced electromagnetism could help Han Xiao create more stable weapons running on electromagnetic force. Electromagnetic weapons were the next stage for normal weapons, and they were more powerful compared to weapons running on gunpowder. These 2 knowledges were extremely important, and Han Xiao had to upgrade them sooner or later. Thus, he used 16 potential points to max out both knowledges. If he wanted to update his combat styles, then his close combat weapons were outdated. Luckily, he could use these new knowledges to build bigger and badder toys. For mid-range weapons, he just had to change his gunpowder weapons into electromagnetic weapons. The Ghost Sniper rifle had always been incomplete, and the advanced electromagnetism was the key to completion. For Amphiptera, since there was nothing that could drastically revolutionize the armor, Han Xiao only had plans to just add a few new functions and attachable charms. He cracked his knuckles and got to work. Not only was he going to renew his combat styles, he also had the power to create large machinery. Han Xiao planned to create a vehicle on the ground to travel with the entire faction. As soon as he thought of this idea, one word popped out in his head. Genius. Han Xiao's eyes sparkled. The vehicle can also be the symbol of this mercenary group, which can raise the interests of the players as it shows that our group is growing together. If I can use the advanced electromagnetism to improve this heavy machinery, then isn't it just a simpler version of an electromagnetic rail cannon? A ground vehicle is the best out of all other vehicles. He dove straight into his work. He bought plenty of spare parts and locked himself in the tuning room. Before he went in, he told the players to rest well in the hub. The crowd did not have any objections. They had changed compared to when they first arrived in space. The players understood the benefits that they would get if they listened to Han Xiao evenly. GE stayed put in the hub center. The players talked and interacted with travelers from different races. Getting to know more about civilization was an entertaining experience. Although the professional players were materialistic and focused on results, there were quite a lot of players like Maple Moon who enjoyed stories, and they were attracted to the fascination of the galaxy. During the resting time, Bun Hit Dog started to make his second episode of the Black Star series. He continued with his TV show editing style. Not only Planet Aquamarine, audiences all over the galaxy could not wait for the second episode. As soon as the show was released, hundreds of thousands of viewers joined in an instant. The show continued from the last episode. It started off from the first mission of the mercenary group, and the show told the tragic story of Sunil and the scenes from the catastrophe. The players who did not step into the galaxy were sucked into the narrative as if they were there. The mercenary group was the eyes of millions of viewers. Through the experiences of the journey, the audiences got to know more about the galaxy along with the mercenary group, so they already had a deep bond with the group. The episode continued until the end of the catastrophe. The mercenary group gained a new member along the way named Hurles, as if he was a main character in a TV show. This person instantly grabbed the attention of the audience. Bun Hit Dog showed the new items in the faction stop while the narrator explained the potential growth of this faction. The audience had a lot of expectations for the future adventures of the mercenary group, and at the same time, they became even more jealous of the players that had joined Han Xiao. Han Xiao also watched the show and was satisfied with Bun Hit Dog's work. The show could slowly be integrated into people's lives and create an emotional bond with the audience. In the Hub Center's battle simulation room, Hurla swung his battleship slicing blade and tore the simulated beasts into pieces. He had not fought in a long time, so he came back to the room and to practice every day. Because Han Xiao was drowned in his building and creation, he did not update the mercenaries' information. So, in Hurla's mind, he was still the only Class B supers in the group. Thus, he felt a huge responsibility on his shoulder and practiced diligently. After battling for a few hours, all the simulations disappeared. The battlefield filled with corpses turned back into an empty white room. Hurles withdrew his sword, wiped his sweat from his forehead, and headed out the room. At this time, Frenzied Sword, Hao Tian, and King Admiral walked out from the gravity room on the side. They saw Hurles and hurriedly walked up to him. "So, you guys are training, too?" Hurles nodded at the members. Over the past few days, the players had been nice to him and were full of passion. He felt that he was getting along with the team. Although, Hurles was weirded out by their names. It seemed that different cultures had different ways of naming. He thought that it was the culture of Han Xiao's planet. He was just wondering why these players could not die. Of course, the players could not tell the truth, so Hurles just thought that it was an Esper power in this group. "Can you teach us some battle techniques?" Hao Tian asked. In the eyes of the players, Hurles was an unopened chest. They tried to activate some certain events such as learning a new skill. However, Hurles did not have the ability to pass down skills, so all he could do was offer a few pointers. However, under his teaching, the players' close combat skills would significantly improve. One would need some luck to activate the event, which mostly depended on Hurles' mood. However, the players would still try and ask once in a while. Hurles felt important after being in this team. Suddenly, a local news agency building sounded an emergency alarm. Breaking news. A team of silvers were attacked by scavengers during their travel in the Shattered Star Ring. Some of them were kidnapped. From our intel, the point of attack was Colton Star Cluster, Fawn Galaxy, Star Zone 4. The size of the scavenger pack is unknown. The escaped silvers are now hiring mercenary groups to save the remaining silvers with a high reward. This information got Hurles' attention. The silvers? This race was from the Silver Spirit Sea that was far away. It was the race of universe royalty. Some powerful and advanced civilizations were called the universe royalty. The three universal civilizations that colonized the universe were of course the universal royalty. The silvers were not on that level yet, but it was a long-lasting advanced civilization, and they also had a special position in the universe. At the same time, this universe royalty was highly demanded in the slave market, so they were the perfect prey for the scavengers. The silvers were rich, so the reward would undoubtedly be insanely high. Hurles, who was short on cash, was slightly moved. He had to try and convince Black Star to seize this opportunity to earn free money. The area under the rule of Godoro was the Garden Galaxy. The Fawn Galaxy was next to Garden, but it was not as large as Garten. A few civilizations that were slightly weaker than Godera had control over different star zones, but conflicts often occurred on the borders. Although they were no actual wars, there was a lot of chaos, and no one had power over those areas. Fawn Galaxy's star zone 4 was right on top of the borders, where it was under no one's jurisdiction. The neighboring civilization ignored the calls of help from the Silvers, so they had to pay high rewards to search for mercenaries to help. Chapter 357, New Gear, New Objectives. Silvers. Han Xiao received Hurl's message while in the machinery repair room and was shocked. He quickly turned off the humming equipment around him, and the room instantly quieted down. The smell of red-hot metal drifted through the room. He knew that the Silvers were an advanced civilization that hailed from a prosperous region of space in the Silver Spirits Sea. They were a member of the Federation of Light along with many other advanced civilizations. They minded their own business, and their region of space was very safe, completely unlike the precarious living environment of the Shattered Star Ring. The Silvers had a very long history. This kind of space royalty rarely visited a place like the Shattered Star Ring. Yet, they were traveling there? Han Xiao honestly did not know what tourist attraction in the Shattered Star Ring could have attracted such high-end folks. What would these people, born in the magnificence of their planet's sprawling cities, want to see in the broken streets of the Shattered Star Ring? The danger level there was 10 out of 10. Did this group of Silvers travel there for the thrill? Having their companions kidnapped to become slaves was indeed thrilling. The Silvers' reproductive capability left much to be desired, so they did not have a very large population. However, they were a species that had evolved to a very high level. To many forces, highly evolved species DNA was like a treasure trove, filled with the secrets of the species' powerful and ancient bloodline. One of the common things of these space royalties was that they were very rare. The Silvers could be used to net an astronomically high price on the slave market, and this was probably why the scavengers had been willing to take the risk. Black Star, the Silvers are willing to pay a hefty sum. They are currently holding a massive recruitment for mercenaries. This is a good opportunity to make money, said Hurlis in a deep voice. Hurlis had not been doing anything for the few days prior, and he was in a hurry to make money. Thus, he had notified Han Xiao of the news the moment that he heard. However, Han Xiao shook his head. The Silvers are indeed quite generous with their reward, but this isn't an assignment we can take on. Large mercenary groups such as the Sky Ring Army will fight tooth and nail to take on the job. We won't even get a chance to compete for it. But we should at least try. There has to be a chance. The mercenary game was full of competition. The large, higher-end mercenary groups could easily get the big jobs. The clients trusted in their reputation and credibility rating. This time was no exception. Only those big-name mercenary groups had gone to answer the Silvers' recruitment posts. Hurlis actually knew that what Han Xiao said was very logical, but he would not give up. Han Xiao remained silent. An event like this was not in his memories. Based on the timelines, this event probably happened during version 1.0, and all of the players back then had still been rolling around in the dirt on their own beginner planets with no chance to interact with an event in space such as this. There was no news on an event like this even after the players finally went to space. This meant that it was not anything major and was most likely resolved successfully, without the chance to affect the future much. To a sudden event like this, Han Xiao tended to be more careful. He already had the knowledge of many other storylines, so should he still take the risk of participating in an unknown storyline? It was not him being afraid of getting in harm's way or changing the development of the storyline, he was someone full of the adventurer's spirit and also a stout believer of the man's romance. However, the most pressing task right now was to get stronger, and taking on the storylines that he knew about was the safest way to achieve that. He did not want to cause any trouble that could be avoided. Let me think about it, said Han Xiao. Okay. I will be on standby. Hurlis nodded. Han Xiao was, after all, the leader of their mercenary group. Although he was currently the strongest member among them, he would never let pride cloud his judgment. After switching off his communicator, Han Xiao turned to inspect the fruits of his labor from the past few days. All the firearms had been replaced with electromagnetic versions. This included pistols, sniper rifles, and assault rifles. The conventional firearms that he was able to produce now were all at least purple gear, with an attack power of around 180 to 240. However, although the electromagnetic weapons that he had created were only of green or blue rarity at best, the damage was at least above 230. The effective range had also been increased by 3 to 5 times. The electromagnetic weapons were much different from the conventional firearms in structure. The inside of the gun barrels consisted of intricate layers of magnetic coils, while the outside was covered by an insulating material that was connected to a bolt. It looked like a long, rectangular box. Every time that the gun fired, the bolt would contract backward before springing back into its original position. As the ammunition for electromagnetic weapons consisted only of singular pieces of metal, there was no need to discard the ammo shells like for conventional firearms, greatly increasing the firing rate. Also, electromagnetic guns had great penetrative power. A sickle-shaped sword was resting on the workbench to the right. This weapon was nearly 2 meters in length and looked like the scythe used by the Reaper himself. Han Xiao held the scythe, and a burst of energy snaked out from his palm into the handle. The next moment, a blinding ray of electrical light shot out from the handle, and lightning-like patterns could be seen all over the blade of the weapon. The scythe's blade gave off a faint bluish glow while giving humming noises. Han Xiao casually swung his hand and left a crescent-shaped afterimage, with sparks of electricity remaining in the air, as if the air itself had been burned apart. After doing a few more test swings, he pressed hard on the end of the handle, and the blade that was well over a meter long broke off into pieces and reformed into a thick electrical snake. This greatly increased the range of the weapon, and the individual pieces of the blade could reform into all manners of shapes, suitable for all types of melee attacks. Han Xiao nodded in satisfaction and reined in his energy. The black blade instantly shrunk until it was only a 40-centimeter long baton. It could even be further folded for ease of travel. Battle Scythe, Razor's Edge was a super equipment and extremely powerful. He had been able to produce this original weapon by combining the blueprint of some sort of mechanical scythe with the incisor gloves using the electromagnetic blades theory. This was his own creation and suited his own combat style. It had a more than formidable attack power and was going to be his new main melee weapon due to his recent increase in strength. Other than that, he also gave Amphiptera a major upgrade. The exoskeleton was outfitted with a thick armor, making it look like the armor of a heavily armored knight. The double layer of armor made the suit taller than 3.5 meters. Both the defensive and damage output had been improved. This was his trump card for assaulting heavily fortified positions head-on and would not be used all the time. Han Xiao did not give the new savage-looking exoskeleton a name. However, Amphiptera had basically gained 2 new modes since its creation. When equipped with the wings, it would be Amphiptera, flight mode, and with the thick layer of armor, it would be Amphiptera, siege mode. The transport, due to the internal structure being too complicated, was still in production. However, he did manage to synthesize a blueprint for it. It was a transport method that would be able to move in the air, on the ground, and underwater. It was just that the appearance was far different from Han Xiao's ideal. Basically, it was a big ball. Han Xiao was able to make a lot of new equipment and tools just by utilizing the basics of the 2 newly acquired advanced knowledges. However, most of them were add-ons at best, and he still had not made any revolutionary breakthroughs. Based on his current level, the features of the mechanic class that was available to him were early to mid-game. He was currently already LV95, a level that had only been attainable for players after version 3.0 back then. This just went to show how disgustingly difficult the class change requirements were. The abilities that Han Xiao wanted to obtain were the abilities that signified the rise of the mechanics in version 3.0 as a player class instant assembly and advanced compression technology. Only by getting those abilities could a mechanic truly start treading upon the path to become a one-man army. The release of those abilities would mean that the mechanic players had finally made it out of the early game. Many kinds of mechanical combat styles were based on the different kinds of compression technology. Due to the increasing weight of the equipment, mobility and ease of carrying became extremely important for items. Like the Godoran equipment, compression technology could help mechanics significantly reduce the size of inactive machinery and other equipment. This meant that the number of tools and items that a mechanic player could bring along in battle would increase drastically, and they no longer had to carry along a burdensome bag everywhere. They could instantly raise an iron fortress out of nowhere. For example, Amphiptera's newest exoskeleton add-on would be able to be folded over and over until it got an easily carryable size. However, it could also go into siege mode whenever needed. Or, the mobile rover turrets that were originally impossible to bring around would be compressed into small cubes that could be chucked into battle to gang on an opponent. There was a total of 3 core knowledges for this kind of ability: instant dismantle and repair, high-density material compression technology, and beginner spatial technology. They were all advanced knowledges. Unfortunately, these three important knowledges would most definitely not be allowed to circulate around a market in the Shattered Star Ring, and their possession was highly monitored by the large space civilizations. Frowning, Han Xiao fell into deep thought. These abilities are crucial for a mechanic's growth. Since the markets in the Shattered Star Ring doesn't offer them, the most direct way would be to join a large intergalactic organization and grind their contribution points to exchange them for them. This is the method most players decided to go with in the past. However, there was another way: leave the Shattered Star Ring and try my luck in another region in space. The even more advanced civilizations don't treat this kind of knowledge with that much importance, and it could be leaked. However, finding them on the market will be completely based on luck, and the chance isn't very high. After touching his chin, the great mechanic Han muttered in a grave voice, "The Silvers are a considerably advanced race. They definitely had access to those three knowledges. If we can get employed by them, then maybe I could try asking for that knowledge in exchange for the job reward. But the chance will also not be that great." After thinking for a while, Han Xiao decided that he might as well try. There was nothing wrong with dreaming. The great mechanic Han was the kind of person to always buy a lottery ticket. So what if he never won? At least then there would be no regrets. After sorting out his equipment and paying the fees for using the repair room, he left for the Mercenary Alliance's lobby. There was a sea of people here, and there were many more mercenaries than the usual. They were probably there due to the Silver's recruitment notice and wanted to try their luck. Han Xiao switched on the mercenary interface and saw the recruitment post sent out by the Silvers at the very top of the notice board. However, he got a shock immediately after opening up the message. Minimum credibility points, 400. 400. We don't even have half that number. Han Xiao was speechless. What is this? Are my dreams going to be crushed before I can even dream? Hey, Black Star. Just as he was about to leave, someone suddenly called over to him from the side. Han Xiao turned and saw a gown-wearing blue-skinned shorty sprint over with that short pair of legs of his while running out of breath. Han Xiao widened his eyes and slapped his forehead as he realized and said, "Hey, you're that, right? Wait, don't tell me. I almost got it. You're called the Nylon People. It's Blue. Martin was mad, and his nail-like hair all grew longer, turning from nails into long metal needles. This was one of the signs that a Blue was angry. What the? Han Xiao's eyes shook. He was almost feeling sorry for himself that he had to hold back from calling the other person a porcupine. Chapter 358, Sky Ring's Invitation. What do you want? Han Xiao thought that this was odd. He had only met Martin once a month ago when Martin tried to recruit mercenaries personally. Han Xiao had somewhat of a bone to pick with this blue-skinned shorty, as the latter had turned his mercenary group down due to their lack of an impressive resume. Martin rubbed his hands together awkwardly and said in a sincere voice, Are you interested in accepting a job? It's the same one as before. Our research team is going to investigate a barren planet. It's already been a month, and you still haven't found anyone to go with you." Martin did not know what to say to that. Recruiting personally like he did would normally only attract the weaker no-name mercenaries. After a long time, he finally could not wait anymore and posted this job onto the Mercenary Alliance's job board. However, there were still no willing recruits due to the laughably poor pay, so the investigative operation was still on hold. A few days ago, after the mercenaries who had participated in the Sunil missions returned, news of a mercenary group full of people capable of revival spread around and piqued the interests of many other mercenaries, causing them to become somewhat famous in the Ubaili hub. Martin heard about this news by chance and realized that the group that he had rejected earlier was actually very powerful and that he had missed out on a good opportunity. He was full of regret and so had sprinted over the moment that he saw Han Xiao in the lobby. "It's still the same price, 400 INAS per person. Let's hurry and go now." Martin had a face full of expectations. Han Xiao had registered once earlier, and he thought that he would not reject the offer. "Go look for someone else." Han Xiao shook his head and turned to leave. He had only wanted to take on the job last time because he could make some quick bucks on the way to the Sunil's planet. Now that the moment had passed, why would he even care about this meager pay? He even had to travel to some faraway planet for it. Martin held onto Han Xiao's arm and hurriedly said, "Is it because of the price? We can pay more." 500, no, how does 480 sound? Martin had firmly latched himself onto Han Xiao's arm, leaving the latter speechless. Martin turned around to be the one doing the begging this time. The trip to Planet Sunil had earned Black Star Mercenary Group a decent amount of fame, which was the only reason the scene was even happening. A mercenary group with reviving soldiers that was also decently powerful would of course be paid a certain amount of attention. The two pushed and pulled until another voice came from the side. "Oh, so you're Black Star." Han Xiao turned around and saw the owner of the voice walk over, clad in a pure white battle suit with a surface so smooth that it was undoubtedly made out of some special alloy. "Sky Ring's people." Han Xiao focused his eyes and plucked Martin off of him. This person was wearing the Sky Ring Army's battle uniform and was a mercenary from Sky Ring. The Sky Ring Army was among the mercenary groups at the top of the food chain in the Shattered Star Ring. They had over 10,000 members, and the army head was even a Calamity Grade Class A Super. They did business across numerous clusters such as the Colton Star Cluster and the Jelok Star Cluster. He should not have had anything to do with Sky Ring at the moment, so Han Xiao was curious. "What does Sky Ring want with me?" "You have a decent team. My division captain would like to discuss cooperation with you. Are you free now?" Han Xiao blinked. Cooperation. Doesn't sound too bad. However, with Sky Ring's power, there truly was no reason to look for a small team like his. Unless Sky Ring was interested in something special of their group. Han Xiao was able to guess the general reason for Sky Ring's interest in them. No doubt. They were probably interested in the fact that we don't die. Han Xiao smiled in his mind. Looks like the gossiping between fellow mercenaries has done its job. He was curious as to what kind of cooperation Sky Ring wanted to discuss with him. A force as big as theirs would definitely not have something simple up their sleeves. "I am free. Let's go." Han Xiao threw off Martin and left with the Sky Ring mercenary. Martin sat on the ground with a dumbfounded expression. The Sky Ring Army's name was known in all corners of the Shattered Star Ring. He could not believe that the mercenary group he had turned away just a month ago had been able to gain their interest and even receive an offer for cooperation. Martin could only think about his previous decision of turning them down with regret and pain. "But I was the first one here." Han Xiao walked into the Sky Ring mercenaries' stronghold and immediately saw around 20 to 30 of their members around the place. They were all of various species and races, and all eyes turned onto him when he walked in. "I am Gashly, the captain of this small division." A mercenary with golden eyes stepped out. He had an impressive physique, with a muscular body that stood over 2 meters tall. His species came from a region in the Jelok Star Cluster. Gashly's battle suit was a little different from the other members. There was a golden ring that circled a triangular crystal at the center of his chest. Although a mercenary group as large as this offered its members a good amount of freedom, they still had their own hierarchy. The more rings that circled the crystal on the suit, the higher the wearer's rank. Rank was decided based on one's strength. The division captain had 1 ring, and there were 4 more ranks above that, with the army commander having 1 more than the highest rank. "Black Star, Han Xiao." After the simple self-introductions, Han Xiao cut right to the chase. "What do you want to cooperate on? What's the situation?" "Sky Ring is devoted to recruiting capable warriors," Gashly said slowly. "You have a great team, and we would like to extend an invitation to you and your team join Sky Ring." Recruiting other mercenary groups was a crucial step for mercenary groups to grow. The Sky Ring Army was a relatively free organization that consisted of many individual teams that were all originally from other mercenary groups. Successfully recruiting strong members would earn the recruiters quite a reward, making all Sky Ring mercenaries pay great attention to potential new recruits, like part-time scouts. Gashly's team just so happened to be stationed at the Ubaerly hub and had heard news about the undead Black Star mercenary group. After validating the authenticity of this information, Gashly had immediately decided to extend an invitation to Han Xiao, as he wanted to take in the whole Black Star mercenary group. He was mainly interested in the revival ability. Otherwise, with their average Class C combat ability, they would not even have entered the sights of the Sky Ring mercenaries. Of course, Gashly also did not bother paying Han Xiao himself any extra attention. This was because, in Sky Ring, the average members were all Class C, while they had several hundred Class B officers. They even had 2 Calamity Grade Supers, which entire civilizations feared. The sudden invitation surprised Han Xiao. However, after some thinking, Han Xiao also thought that it was not too unreasonable. Mercenaries that could revive as much as they wanted would be able to become the best vanguard and cannon fodder. Even a large organization like Skyring would not ignore this ability. He calculated the losses and gains in his mind. Joining Skyring would guarantee them special privileges, and they would be able to enjoy Skyring's influence, which had been built up over the centuries. He could also gain access to many new shop items. But if the Black Star mercenary group worked under Skyring, they would cease to be their own faction. The long-term losses were too much to bear, and he was not willing to give up on having his own faction just for some short-term gains. Your offer is very attractive, but I'm not really interested in becoming part of another organization, Han Xiao declined politely. The onlooking Skyring mercenaries all started to whisper among themselves after hearing that. He actually declined. There's only benefits to receive, so why wouldn't he accept? I didn't even hesitate when I was recruited. Gashley had a face full of surprise, and he thought that Han Xiao did not understand the benefits they would be receiving after joining. Thus, he then went on to patiently explain. You might not be too knowledgeable about the benefits that Skyring can offer. Firstly, we do not confine our members with strict rules. You can even choose to become an individual mercenary, or you can also join a team, as long as you complete a minimum of 2 job assignments every year. Also, there are many other benefits enjoyed by Skyring members such as... Sorry. Han Xiao interrupted him and shook his head. Skyring is indeed very nice, but I'm a man who believes that benefits always come with risks. Acting with my own faction suits me more, but I would still like to thank you for the invitation. Chapter 359, I'm a professional at planting flags. The crowd exchanged looks with surprise on their faces. Gashley shook his head. Black Star had used polite words, and he was not angry at being rejected, just felt that it was a missed opportunity. Although Skyring was a large organization, most of the members were not arrogant and did not feel superior. Skyring was an official and lawful mercenary group, so they would not make enemies in the same industry easily. Gashley felt it was a shame. At this time, Han Xiao suddenly changed the topic and asked, it's only been a month since Black Star mercenary group was created, yet Skyrings contacted us. Is it because we have the reviving ability? Being an honest man, Gashley nodded and said, yes, it is. Although I'm not willing to join other mercenary groups, I feel we can be in a partnership. Skyring definitely takes on many dangerous missions. My group can accept tasks from Skyring and take on these dangerous missions with high risks of death. Gashley thought that having a partnership was not a bad idea even though he could not recruit Black Star. Skyring also had similar partnership relationships with other mercenary groups. There was a long list of records of these partners, who were like backups. In times of danger, Skyring could ask for help from these reliable partners anytime. The two discussed for a bit and agreed on their intentions on the partnership, which Gashley reported to the organization. Many mercenary groups wanted to get in touch with such a large organization like Skyring, and people applied for partnerships very often, so the people of Skyring were very used to it. Most of the applications did not meet the requirements, but because of the special characteristic of being able to revive, Black Star's application was approved immediately. When its name was added to the partnership list, Han Xiao signed the partnership agreement. What the agreement roughly meant was that all members of Skyring could contact Black Star for support privately at any time, and they had to pay a reward individually. The two parties of the agreement were in a partnership, and any form of combat between the parties was prohibited. If Skyring was hired by a certain party, Black Star could not accept hiring from its hostile party, and vice versa. If that happened, the agreement would have been breached, the first party to breach it would have to pay a fine, and the agreement would be voided. Other than that, the other terms were very free and easy. It was regulated by the Mercenary Alliance, compulsory to comply. Han Xiao was rather satisfied with the result. It was like gaining a new customer and expanding his business by borrowing Skyring's name. Skyring definitely did not lack combat opportunities, which meant his mercenary group would not lack job opportunities as well. Anyway, the mercenary group had just been created, so it did not matter who their missions came from. Although they could not enjoy Skyring's privileges through the partnership, at least they had some backing. It was beneficial for the mercenary group's development. After signing the agreement, Han Xiao suddenly thought of something and said, if I guessed correctly, you guys should have accepted the Silver's request, right? Gashley nodded and said, no large mercenary groups are going to give up this opportunity. My team has been summoned by the Cotters, so we will be leaving and heading toward Fong Galaxy later on. Han Xiao's eyes sparkled and asked, can my group follow? If you guys get the mission, our help might be needed. I'm happy to accept the hiring from Skyring. Gashly was stunned for a second. After some consideration, he realized that it did not seem like there was any downside to bringing a group of undying mercenaries. Okay, bring your team to the pier later. We will take our spaceship together. However, be mentally prepared. If the mission is very easy, Skyring will not need help, so you will have wasted your time. Han Xiao waved, signifying that it was not a problem. He felt that this was a pleasant surprise. He could skip the credibility rating requirement using the relationship with Skyring. Although his mercenary group was still very weak and there was not much chance of gaining the Silver's favor, they could expect good things from Skyring's hire. The 3 knowledges of the compression technology were his target. There were plenty of strong people in Skyring, and class advancement knowledge should not be in shortage. If they were fortunate enough to be hired, he felt that he could try to make requests. After deciding the time and pier number, Han Xiao went back to the stronghold and gathered all members. We have a new job, so get ready. We will be leaving in a while, Han Xiao said. The people's face turned bright. They were thrilled. Knowing that the mercenary group had growth potential, they had been looking forward to the next adventure, and it finally came after doing very little for so long. Maple Moon raised her hand and asked, what are we doing this time? Why did the mercenary group information not show a new hiring mission? The thing about the Silvers drew quite a lot of attention, so we're following the people of Skyring to Fong Galaxy. I have brokered a partnership relationship with them, so we might have a chance to be hired. Han Xiao thought and added, also, you don't have to raise your hand if you have a question. No wonder no mission had been triggered in their interfaces. They followed Han Xiao's lead and had no problem with the arrangement. Hurles was quite surprised. He knew how huge the Skyring was, yet in only a few hours, how did Han Xiao suddenly become Skyring's partner? There was completely no sign of it beforehand. Hurles pulled Han Xiao aside privately and expressed his doubts. Han Xiao, of course, did not have anything to hide. He told him about what had happened. I see. Hurles understood, admiring Han Xiao discreetly. If he was the one to make contact, he probably would not have thought about suggesting a partnership. Then, they would have lost this opportunity. Although Han Xiao was not strong enough in his eyes, his ability to catch opportunities astounded him. A person like this was more suitable as the captain. So, did you foresee anything? Hurles asked softly. Han Xiao shook his head. There really was nothing at all. The Silver's storyline was not a storyline that he was familiar with. He did not have any memory of it, so it was probably no big deal. The Skyring army was very large. Gashly's team's spaceship was a 12-meter-long civilian spaceship. Its front was narrow, and its back was wide, streamlined like a water droplet but with clear edges. The exterior armor was covered with dark gold metal plates, and the 2 sides of the tail had crossbars diagonally connecting into the spaceship body. At the ends of these crossbars were spiral-shaped propellers, 4 in total, able to change angles agilely. This was a spaceship from some civilization in the Jelok star cluster. It was equipped with a light jump engine, suitable for galactic traveling, but weak in combat power. This kind of small spaceship looked much cooler than the large and swollen spaceship of galactic traveling agencies. The players kept sizing it up with glowing eyes. Han Xiao touched his chin. He also wanted to buy a mercenary group private spaceship, but sadly, it was too expensive. Even the humblest one-man galactic spaceship cost more than 10,000 INAS. He could only build it himself if he wanted to save on that money, but building a galactic spaceship had too many difficulties: engine, energy source, armor adaptability, structure strength, detector, and many more, which required a large number of knowledges. He was way too far from being able to do that. The gathering time came, and the Skyring mercenaries appeared. They walked up to the spaceship. Gashly set the auto route in the control panel, and the ship left the pier. After some trembling, it entered the exterior vacuum space. The tail propeller emitted a golden glow, and it gradually entered the jumping state. The colorful galaxy outside the window rapidly became blurry, then into stretched lines, like it was infinitely long. It had entered a teleportation stargate near Ubairli hub. We will very soon arrive in the Fong Galaxy through the stargate. Gashly turned to the people and said, The Silver's spaceship is parked at number 12 planet of Star Zone 4, and the travel time is about 12 days. There were 80 or so people in the spaceship, but there was still plenty of space. After the players were given their rooms, they took the initiative and went to chat with the Sky Ring mercenaries. Han Xiao found Gashley. They had only met each other that day, so it was mainly to talk about the mission. However, Gashley did not know the details either. He only knew that he was one of the team summoned, and the representative of Sky Ring this time was a 3-ring level cotter, codenamed I-Sorcerer. 3-ring level cotters were the backbone of the organization, mostly grade B supers. This I-Sorcerer was the leader of this mission, and that person would be the one that had the power to decide if Han Xiao was hired. Their codename suggested that it should be a mage. Han Xiao had yet to come into contact with the mage class. The mage class was similar to the mechanic class in the sense of their high difficulty, and its enchanting ability could enhance mechanical equipment too. Unfortunately, there were only pugilists, espers, and mechanics on planet Aquamarine. After chatting for a while, Gashley went back to his room to rest. Han Xiao explored the spaceship himself. He came to the living area of the spaceship and realized that the spaceship had a battle simulation room. Using virtual technology to simulate various enemies and environments, one could experience the effect of battle training. It was marked as occupied. Han Xiao controlled the monitor, and the image from inside showed up. Hurla swung the battleship slicing blade and was fighting non-stop against weird beasts. Silver flames splashed everywhere like waves. Han Xiao watched for a while, licked his lips, pressed the pause button, opened the simulation room door, and walked in. The Legendary Mechanic Chapter 360. The crowd exchanged looks with surprise on their faces. Gashley shook his head. Blackstar had used polite words, and he was not angry at being rejected, just felt that it was a missed opportunity. Although Sky Ring was a large organization, most of the members were not arrogant and did not feel superior. Sky Ring was an official and lawful mercenary group, so they would not make enemies in the same industry easily. Gashley felt it was a shame. At this time, Han Xiao suddenly changed the topic and asked, "It's only been a month since Blackstar Mercenary Group was created, yet Sky Rings contacted us. Is it because we have the reviving ability?" Being an honest man, Gashley nodded and said, "Yes, it is. Although I'm not willing to join other mercenary groups, I feel we can be in a partnership. Sky Ring definitely takes on many dangerous missions. My group can accept tasks from Sky Ring and take on these dangerous missions with high risks of death." Gashley thought that having a partnership was not a bad idea even though he could not recruit Blackstar. Sky Ring also had similar partnership relationships with other mercenary groups. There was a long list of records of these partners, who were like backups. In times of danger, Sky Ring could ask for help from these reliable partners anytime. The two discussed for a bit and agreed on their intentions on the partnership, which Gashley reported to the organization. Many mercenary groups wanted to get in touch with such a large organization like Sky Ring, and people applied for partnerships very often, so the people of Sky Ring were very used to it. Most of the applications did not meet the requirements, but because of the special characteristic of being able to revive, Blackstar's application was approved immediately. When its name was added to the partnership list, Han Xiao signed the partnership agreement. What the agreement roughly meant was that all members of Sky Ring could contact Blackstar for support privately at any time, and they had to pay a reward individually. The two parties of the agreement were in a partnership, and any form of combat between the parties was prohibited. If Sky Ring was hired by a certain party, Blackstar could not accept hiring from its hostile party, and vice versa. If that happened, the agreement would have been breached, the first party to breach it would have to pay a fine, and the agreement would be voided. Other than that, the other terms were very free and easy. It was regulated by the Mercenary Alliance, compulsory to comply. Han Xiao was rather satisfied with the result. It was like gaining a new customer and expanding his business by borrowing Sky Ring's name. Sky Ring definitely did not lack combat opportunities, which meant his mercenary group would not lack job opportunities as well. Anyway, the mercenary group had just been created, so it did not matter who their missions came from. Although they could not enjoy Sky Ring's privileges through the partnership, at least they had some backing. It was beneficial for the mercenary group's development. After signing the agreement, Han Xiao suddenly thought of something and said, "If I guessed correctly, you guys should have accepted the Silver's request, right?" Gashley nodded and said, "No large mercenary groups are going to give up this opportunity. My team has been summoned by the Cotters, so we will be leaving and heading toward Fong Galaxy later on. Han Xiao's eyes sparkled and asked, can my group follow? If you guys get the mission, our help might be needed. I'm happy to accept the hiring from Skyring. Gashley was stunned for a second. After some consideration, he realized that it did not seem like there was any downside to bringing a group of undying mercenaries. Okay, bring your team to the pier later. We will take our spaceship together. However, be mentally prepared. If the mission is very easy, Skyring will not need help, so you will have wasted your time. Han Xiao waved, signifying that it was not a problem. He felt that this was a pleasant surprise. He could skip the credibility rating requirement using the relationship with Skyring. Although his mercenary group was still very weak and there was not much chance of gaining the Silver's favor, they could expect good things from Skyring's hire. The 3 knowledges of the compression technology were his target. There were plenty of strong people in Skyring, and class advancement knowledge should not be in shortage. If they were fortunate enough to be hired, he felt that he could try to make requests. After deciding the time and pier number, Han Xiao went back to the stronghold and gathered all members. We have a new job, so get ready. We will be leaving in a while, Han Xiao said. The people's face turned bright. They were thrilled. Knowing that the mercenary group had growth potential, they had been looking forward to the next adventure, and it finally came after doing very little for so long. Maple Moon raised her hand and asked, what are we doing this time? Why did the mercenary group information not show a new hiring mission? The thing about the Silvers drew quite a lot of attention, so we're following the people of Skyring to Fong Galaxy. I have brokered a partnership relationship with them, so we might have a chance to be hired. Han Xiao thought and added, also, you don't have to raise your hand if you have a question. No wonder no mission had been triggered in their interfaces. They followed Han Xiao's lead and had no problem with the arrangement. Hurles was quite surprised. He knew how huge the Skyring was, yet in only a few hours, how did Han Xiao suddenly become Skyring's partner? There was completely no sign of it beforehand. Hurles pulled Han Xiao aside privately and expressed his doubts. Han Xiao, of course, did not have anything to hide. He told him about what had happened. I see. Hurles understood, admiring Han Xiao discreetly. If he was the one to make contact, he probably would not have thought about suggesting a partnership. Then, they would have lost this opportunity. Although Han Xiao was not strong enough in his eyes, his ability to catch opportunities astounded him. A person like this was more suitable as the captain. So, did you foresee anything? Hurles asked softly. Han Xiao shook his head. There really was nothing at all. The Silver's storyline was not a storyline that he was familiar with. He did not have any memory of it, so it was probably no big deal. The Skyring army was very large. Gashley's team's spaceship was a 12-meter-long civilian spaceship. Its front was narrow, and its back was wide, streamlined like a water droplet but with clear edges. The exterior armor was covered with dark gold metal plates, and the 2 sides of the tail had crossbars diagonally connecting into the spaceship body. At the ends of these crossbars were spiral-shaped propellers, 4 in total, able to change angles agilely. This was a spaceship from some civilization in the Jelok star cluster. It was equipped with a light jump engine, suitable for galactic traveling, but weak in combat power. This kind of small spaceship looked much cooler than the large and swollen spaceship of galactic traveling agencies. The players kept sizing it up with glowing eyes. Han Xiao touched his chin. He also wanted to buy a mercenary group private spaceship, but sadly, it was too expensive. Even the humblest one-man galactic spaceship cost more than 10,000 INAS. He could only build it himself if he wanted to save on that money, but building a galactic spaceship had too many difficulties: engine, energy source, armor adaptability, structure strength, detector, and many more, which required a large number of knowledges. He was way too far from being able to do that. The gathering time came, and the Skyring mercenaries appeared. They walked up to the spaceship. Gashley set the auto route in the control panel, and the ship left the pier. After some trembling, it entered the exterior vacuum space. The tail propeller emitted a golden glow, and it gradually entered the jumping state. The colorful galaxy outside the window rapidly became blurry, then into stretched lines, like it was infinitely long. It had entered a teleportation stargate near Ubaili hub. We will very soon arrive in the Fong Galaxy through the stargate. Gashley turned to the people and said, the Silver's spaceship is parked at number 12 planet of Star Zone 4, and the travel time is about 12 days. There were 80 or so people in the spaceship, but there was still plenty of space. After the players were given their rooms, they took the initiative and went to chat with the Sky Ring mercenaries. Han Xiao found Gashley. They had only met each other that day, so it was mainly to talk about the mission. However, Gashley did not know the details either. He only knew that he was one of the teams summoned, and the representative of Sky Ring this time was a 3-ring level cotter, codenamed I-Sorcerer. 3-ring level cotters were the backbone of the organization, mostly grade B supers. This I-Sorcerer was the leader of this mission, and that person would be the one that had the power to decide if Han Xiao was hired. Their codename suggested that it should be a mage. Han Xiao had yet to come into contact with the mage class. The mage class was similar to the mechanic class in the sense of their high difficulty, and its enchanting ability could enhance mechanical equipment too. Unfortunately, there were only pugilists, espers, and mechanics on planet Aquamarine. After chatting for a while, Gashley went back to his room to rest. Han Xiao explored the spaceship himself. He came to the living area of the spaceship and realized that the spaceship had a battle simulation room. Using virtual technology to simulate various enemies and environments, one could experience the effect of battle training. It was marked as occupied. Han Xiao controlled the monitor, and the image from inside showed up. Hurla swung the battleship's slicing blade and was fighting non-stop against weird beasts. Silver flames splashed everywhere like waves. Han Xiao watched for a while, licked his lips, pressed the pause button, opened the simulation room door, and walked in.